Everything starts with this insanely popular autumn game, Noblesse Fantasia. But the thing is, by name it's just an autumn game, but in reality a full-fledged magical action fantasy world. Here the main goal is to defeat the strongest villain Tilty. She is the boss everyone must face. He says that in the end he gave her his whole life, lived as a sword saint to follow his destiny, and now everything has changed. It all began in that quiet little village under the mountain. Sold falls to the ground after a fierce exchange of blows, and his father says the duel is practically over. But the boy is not going to accept it. Although his father calls him to stop, Sold gets up and says he is not finished yet. He bursts inside again, shouts at his dad to get ready, while the older man tries to hold him back and make him slow down. Passing by, a villager looks at both of them and jokes that the Master Ranger is always so fired up. Nearby, an old woman also notices and thinks how hardworking this little Lord Sold is, training every day. Actually, the father is the first to start sweating and finally asks Sold if they can just rest a bit. But Sold just looks at him with complete focus. He tells his dad that he must train him much harder because he generally does not know how to use magic, so he has to compensate for it with a sword. All this happens in a small, quiet village, lost somewhere in the very wilderness. Turns out this entire region is hidden deep within the Kingdom of Alberta. This is the world of the game Noblesse Fantasia. If you liked this video, click like and subscribe to the channel to see more such videos. See you in the next video. Turned out the child was born into the Ranger family. They are just minor nobility living far away in the province. Sold realizes that he has actually reincarnated into this world as a sword. When he was still tiny, his new parents named him Soul Ranger. He remembers how he first woke up and saw that these two strangers were looking at him. But as he was raised, he began to piece everything together by overhearing the names and professions people talked about. Eventually, he understood that he lives in some random corner of the game world, namely, he is the son of a baron, but he does not influence the story at all. He was sure there must be some real reason behind why he was thrown into such a game world. And even despite the fact that he hoped so much for a new life, Dad simply calls him back to reality. Sold's father calls him over as if about to say something serious, but it turns out to be the worst news that could happen to a gamer. His dad explains that the Ranger family has not been able to use magic for generations, leaving. Sold's dreams are shattered. The game world is built on magic and saving the world from monsters, so the realization that he cannot use any of these things hits him painfully, just stares into emptiness, because in a way, in such a world, someone who cannot use magical fields is considered a useless person without a true purpose. But even so, he is not going to give up in his desire to be special. He continues to believe in fate and runs out of the house, shouting to his dad, "Look what I found in the attic." Sold raises an old scroll with the image of a warrior and looks as if he has finally found his big chance. He is sure he has found a secret Techniqueth sword art in the style of the demon god, and his dad stands nearby, all stressed out. The scroll talks about a crazy power that allows a person to harbor demonic energy within and turn the soul itself into a weapon. They say that from this special stance, the user can unleash a deadly move known as Kama Isen. Sold is insanely excited because he thinks he has found a secret game mechanic hidden in the real world. He is firmly convinced this technique is exactly what a person like him, who does not know how to use magic at all, needs. Raising his sword, he shouts that this is his destiny and he will master the style of the demonic god, but his dad immediately cuts him off and says that he is completely wrong. This really throws him off track. Father admits that the scroll is a family relic passed down from generation to generation. And then he reveals the truth: all the secret techniques are complete fakes. It turned out that in their family, every man for 3 generations tried to learn that scroll during training. None of them managed to make that technique actually work. Dad says that the ancestors probably just made it up to give children without magic false hope. He stood stunned because the legendary scroll turned out to be just a story written on paper. Sold lowered his eyes to the scroll, feeling completely broken. He cannot accept the idea that it might be a fake. But Dad reassures him, it's not terrible if he cannot cast spells or master that particular style. He explains that their family has protected this peaceful land for generations, and such a life is truly wonderful. Left the two of them standing silently, just looking at this huge world. Until Sold came to his senses and shouted that his father must be lying about the scroll being a fake. He doesn't believe for a moment and shouts that he will prove it is real, no matter what happens. Since then, he trained every day without missing a single session under his father's watchful eye. 3 years have already passed. Sold has grown well, but the god-demon style still eludes him. Dad looks at him and says that this move is actually just a drawing in a book, then asks if he is finally ready to quit. Soul stubbornly keeps swinging. He is not going to give up on his dream. Soul looks his father straight in the eyes and shouts that he will never give up, making it clear that he remains on this path. Dad just sighs and says it's okay, let him work until he is finally satisfied. But Dad says it's time to head home because Mom will get angry, and Soul quickly agrees that that's enough for today. Looking at his parents and the housemaid, he suddenly realizes he is incredibly lucky he ended up in a truly good family. And life is really wonderful, full of big family dinners and daytime horseback rides through the fields. He spends time fishing with his dad, his mom watches from the picnic, and he sincerely admits this life has no complaints. But when the sun sets over the estate and stars appear in the sky, everything begins to feel a little different. Soul lies awake in his room, staring at the ceiling and thinking that he really wants to believe in something more. There needs to be a real reason why he reincarnated specifically as some unknown nobleman in this world. Outside the window, the sky has turned gray, and a heavy rain poured over the quiet house. Soul anxiously asks his mom where Dad is, and she says he left earlier for a meeting with other nobles. She is a little embarrassed, wondering why even provincial nobles like them were invited. Soul just looks out the window at the rain and for a moment gets lost in his thoughts. He tells her that today he will go to training alone, and she warns, don't overdo it because the weather is bad today. As he leaves, he thinks about how he has trained with the sword every day and he is already 10 years old. He wonders if the day will ever come when he can truly use the god-demon style. But he quickly shakes his head, convincing himself that it will not help with anything. He decides not to lose heart and sincerely believes that the style he invented is his true destiny. Suddenly something caught his eye and he froze in place. He rushed to run to the trees, convinced that a strange sound came from the depths of the forest. In the middle of the forest, the rain is pouring heavily. Soul is breaking through the trees, stopping for a second to catch his breath because he notices a young girl who fell face down in the mud and cannot believe his eyes. He rushes to her, kneels down, and through the noise of the thunderstorm asks if she is okay and why she ended up here in such a storm. Then he notices her bare feet and begins to wonder if she is some kind of runaway. The girl lets out a weak moan, and Soul tries to persuade her to stay with him until I looked at her tear-streaked face and tried to understand where she could have come from. At that moment something caught his gaze and he froze. Strange energy swirled in the air, and suddenly Soul suddenly sees that the rain is literally freezing right in front of him, and he has no idea what is happening. Soul completely froze, eyes wide open. He tries to find words but simply whispered to himself that this cannot be real, repeating that all this cannot be happening while he stares at the monster's sharp fangs and cannot understand why it had to appear right here. And he steadfastly stands between the girl and that giant shadow. Looking closer, he realized that it was actually a high-level boss from the finale of the game he had already completed. And he begins to spiral into doubts, thinking that he was reborn not just for nothing, and now wonders if this mess is all he got for his faith. Remaining in his new life while the wolf stands over them, he wonders if his fate is simply to die here without. As if it meant something, he thinks that it is impossible and just too cruel for it all to end like this. He suddenly lunged forward, grabbed the girl, and dove aside when a colossal explosion of ice crashed to the ground right where they had just stood. After the explosion, they both hit the ground hard. Tilty gave a muffled groan, and Soul is just trying to understand what just happened. Tilty looks him straight in the eyes and says she is sorry, explaining that those slave traders actually somewhat released that monster into freedom. Find her and catch her again. She starts to panic and says to Soul that he needs to get out of there right now, begging him run so that he does not suffer because of her. Soul is completely stunned. He breaks into tears, sobs, and looks completely broken because of that mess. Looking at her face, Soul suddenly realizes her eyes are exactly the same as those belonging to the greatest threat from that game. He loved the legendary sinister villain Tilty Majester. She was the girl everyone in the game hated because she constantly tormented the main hero and did terrible things. And the worst part, in every version of the story, she is doomed to lose everything and end up in complete ruin. When I finished the game, the truth about Tilty's past finally started to make sense, and it turned out that every person she ever cared about was already dead, and she was left completely alone. She was born the daughter of a mistress, and because of this everyone hated her. So she lived in complete poverty until her mother was killed, and she was captured and enslaved. Finally, a noble family appeared from the village and saved her, but tragedy did not end. They were also brutally slaughtered. Tilty harbored resentment against the whole world because it only brought suffering to the people around her. Soon she simply began to hate herself. And she became the saddest girl in the world and later turned into the villain everyone feared. Sold looks at the crying girl and suddenly realizes she has exactly the same eyes as the villain from the game. He wonders if it is precisely what leaves her alone that turns her into that monster, and this thought hits him like a ton of bricks. He draws his sword and stands right in front of the girl in chains to protect her. A giant wolf appears and says that it finally sees what is happening, and Saul shouts, demanding to know what kind of creature it is and what it really is. Looking at the beast, Sold says that this moment is exactly what he was born for. The girl raises her eyes through tears and tells him that her name is Tilty. Finally, Sold realizes why he was brought into this world by a nobleman so that he could do whatever he wishes. He firmly tells Tilty that he himself will change her fate. He lets out a loud scream, preparing for battle. And Tilty just stands and watches in complete shock. His sword really begins to glow. Sold lets release a huge burst of energy that will strike directly at the giant wolf Tilty, who just watches from the ground like. The light dims and Sold suddenly realizes something. He did not know it then, but in fact he activated a hidden part of the game that most players never see, and explains that. It turns out the secret to unlocking this power is very specific. You must consciously fight with a sword, stand still, not move, and take the enemy's blow directly on yourself. But most importantly, to have a true, desperate need to protect someone, Tilty watches, completely immersed. Oh how! His soul begins to fill his entire body with this wild demonic power. This is the beginning. The demon god style, a technique that transforms his entire essence into. He is just a living blade. He stays low to the ground and moves so fast that he becomes almost a blurred spot. And with all his might he throws the sword upward, shouting a special strike of the ice wolf that crashes right into the wolf's face. Shards of energy scatter in all directions as the strike hits cleanly. Sold finishes his colossal strike and presses himself to the ground as the power envelops him. The giant wolf is completely shattered by the attack's power. When Sold realizes that the secret style of the demon god he used is real, he starts laughing to himself. He can't believe the legends turned out to be true. He sheathes the sword and slowly steps back, smiling inwardly. All those crazy trainings were not in vain. He approaches Tilty, looks her straight in the eyes, and says that he is a sword ranger and that she is actually his destiny. And then he remembers why he reincarnated exactly here. He smiles broadly at her and promises that now everything will be fine. Tilty bursts into happy tears. She tells him that she is just glad to be by his side to change the world together, and she jumps to hug him tightly, and Sold looks at her and warns about the dark fate awaiting her as a villainess, but says that he just deal with anyone and anything that tries to stand in their way. Meanwhile, far away on a dark cliff, towers a huge castle where a storm rages and lightning drills through the sky. The man on the throne asks if their wolf Fenrir has already returned, and his followers have to tell him the bad news. They have heard nothing from either the wolf or the slave trader. In the dark castle, the masked leader got angry and ordered his men to immediately find that boy because he is obsessed with searching for Tilty. He stands, staring at the giant skull, and is tormented by the question of where she could have gone. Sitting on a throne made of bones, he calls Tilty his beloved sister and swears to himself that he will definitely bring her back home. Meanwhile, at night, a carriage approaches the ranger's estate, and inside a man sighs heavily. What a long working day it has been. Garland steps over the threshold and loudly exclaims, "Finally, I am home." The family's nurse, Boba, is already here to greet him. But Sold runs up to greet his father. Next to him, the family introduces Tilty and tells Garland who she is, and then they announce loud news. They tell him that they want to officially welcome Tilty as a new member of the Ranger family, which this completely caught Garland by surprise. He looks at Sold with a face full of shock and asks him what the hell is really going on. Finally, peace reigns in the mansion. Mero, the nurse Boba, and Tilty, who is now safe from her dark past, can finally catch their breath. Now the entire Ranger squad has gathered together. Garland leads the house, and Sold silently keeps the secret that he has reincarnated. The whole family gathered at the dinner table, and Garland is puzzling over this story. Sold tells how he saved Tilty from the monster and brought her back. He looks his father straight in the eyes to make sure he is listening. But Garland just crossed his arms and takes it all in. Mero looked at him and asked if he didn't think the fate of the poor girl was a real tragedy. The room quieted a bit when they realized that Tilty literally had no one left to return to. Soul wastes no time and begs his dad to let her stay. Garland sits there for a moment just thinking while suddenly he changes his mood, gives a thumbs up and tells them that it's not a problem at all, and winking, he said that doing good deeds is just part of the job of a noble family. He stands up and officially announces that from now on her name is Tilty Ranger. Everyone shouts with joy and sincerely rejoices for her. Sold smiled to himself, thinking about how they finally took a real step forward to change the future. But he fully understands what is at stake. Tilty is the villain from the game Noblesse Fantasia, who is ultimately supposed to be completely destroyed. His whole world is straight from that game he sold and played in his past life. He is sure he was reincarnated here just to save Tilty. He knows he must stay close so she is safe. So when Garland tells him to teach her about their home, Sewell agrees without hesitation, feeling as if everything went according to his plan. She became part of the family just as he had hoped. Because she is 9 and a year younger than him, Sold smiles widely at her and says that now he is her older brother. This made Tilty's face blush brightly, and she tries to find words to respond. The pressure becomes unbearable, and she suddenly rushes out of the room, leaving. He stood there completely stunned and calls her by name. Later, Garland worries she looks so scared, and while Sold asks Mom if she is gentle with her, Merle assures that she is, although Tilty is still hiding behind closed doors and stubbornly refuses to talk to any of them. Muro says that Tilty is probably just trying to sort out her feelings, so it shouldn't be forced. And instead just endure. Garland is confident that sooner or later she will open up to them, even if she is barely holding on right now. The family stands nearby and their faces show the full seriousness of the situation. And Sold agrees with his mom. I think how hard it must be for Tilty when she is suddenly told that she has a new family. The longer the night lasts, the more Sold brings up the topic of the slave market cleanup operation, which his dad had mentioned earlier. Garland explains that several aristocrats actually gathered specifically to handle that mission. Although they managed to free the slaves and take them to a safe place, they were never able to completely destroy the entire organization. Sold froze and asked if Tilty was one of those who ended up in this, which could. Suddenly it dawns on him she really was just a prisoner even before they found her. Everything starts to fall into place in his head. That wolf from before was definitely sent by those traders to drive her back into that slave trade organization. Sold realizes how insane it is those people really used the legendary beast Fenrir for this. And he can't help but wonder, why did they go to such trouble to target Tilty specifically? He thinks about the organization hiding behind the slave traders and sees Tilty as so tiny and scared. He begins to suspect that these guys are the ones behind Tilty's demise flag. Returning to the present, Garland stands in the middle of the field and tells Sold that it's time to show what he is capable of. Specifically about Imagine style, he says he is a master and Sold is more than ready to prove it. Under the light of the thin crescent moon, Sold takes position and his father watches attentively. He raises the sword high and gathers every drop of energy within himself. He relived the moment again when he first came face to face with Fenrir and felt the power of the ley lines. He feels the same wild energy that now surges through his body and blade. Sold looks his father straight in the eyes and shouts that the legends turned out to be true. It is about that secret technique that supposedly only the heir of the Ranger family should know. He shouts the demon's name as if he were a god himself, and Garland is so stunned that he cannot utter a single word in response. Sold tries to show off the icy wolf flash, but his wooden sword suddenly cracks and breaks in his hands. Sold begins to panic. The sword broke, and Dad just stands and looks at him as if he has lost his mind. Garland says he will just buy him a new one, but Sold does not back down, stubbornly insists that he is telling the truth about that power. The truth is that since that day, he has never been able to pull off that style even once. He grabs the broken handle and suddenly realizes this hidden move in the game only works under some special condition. The plan is to find that trigger as soon as possible so he can master the style and protect Tilty from new attacks. All the more so since the Rangers officially took Tilty in, she finally lives a calm, quiet life. The whole family gathers around the table for a large pizza. Everyone is wildly having fun, and Tilty even takes out a brand new dress sewn by Mero especially for her, and the family breadwinner gladly encourages her. Garland and Sold return from a trip, proudly showing a huge fish and a crab they caught. But when everyone simultaneously starts showering compliments and bursting with admiration, Tilty just stands there, completely stunned by. Suddenly all attention falls on her. She rushes out of the room, leaving the rest of the family standing there. Completely confused, Garland complains that she still doesn't open up to him, but Mero gently reminds that such things take time and they can't just rush. Sold looks at them and thinks that living together should be enough to protect everyone, although he can't help but wonder, will avoiding a dark future for Tilty really be that simple? That night a powerful storm rolled over the house, lightning tearing the sky apart. Sold lies sleepless in bed, staring at the ceiling and feeling like there is one truly important moment in Tilty's story that he completely forgets. The sound of broken glass echoed throughout the house, and his eyes suddenly opened wide when he jumps out of bed, grabs the sword, and starts running, wondering what the loud noise is. He instantly understood it was from Tilty's room. He didn't waste a second. With a jerk, he flings open the door, ready for anything waiting on the other side. The room is pitch dark. What stands before him is worse than he imagined. He shouts Tilty's name when he sees. The window is broken and 3 eerie bat monsters circle around her bed. Tilty is curled up in a ball, trapped inside. A whirlwind of dark energy. Sold looks at her, trying to understand what this thing is, until he finally realizes it is pure darkness. One-eyed monsters hiss and make strange sounds, hovering right above her. Sold froze, completely stunned. Why did this magical beast appear here? But his shock doesn't slow him down. He calls Tilty again and draws his sword, ready to rush at them. Sold dashed forward, trying to use the only weapon he had, but he instantly realizes the sword is still broken, and this is not at all what is needed for such a fight. The monsters do not slow down at all. One of them emits a sharp, piercing scream as they circle the room. Soldier tries to brush them off with a broken handle, muttering under his breath and glancing at Tilty. He decisively tells Tilty, "Wait a little longer, I will run to find Dad and ask him for help." But suddenly she shouted for him to just leave her alone, and this completely caught him by surprise. Tilty started sobbing, apologizing, and saying that this always happens to her. And she continues, she doesn't even understand why all these troubles follow her like a shadow. Soldier looks at her, feeling her pain, simply whispers her name and makes a decision. He shouted back, "I will never leave her, we are family now." Soldier froze in place. Stunned, he realizes that his promise to stay together was a huge mistake because Tilty, with tears in her eyes, hugs him tightly and says that he is the one who saved her. He tells how his whole family welcomed her with open arms, but even despite all that kindness, she was happy only for a second. Tilty admits that it was this happiness that made her hesitate. Shadows began to engulf everything around, and she screamed that it was pointless and that she didn't belong here at all. She screams that if they stay, they will only drag everyone down, and Soul just stands there and finally understands. Tilty cries and screams that she will ruin them all, and at that moment Soul remembers everything from the game. This is the hidden backstory of the villain from Noblesse Fantasia, the very part that players see after the credits. He pulled out one specific episode from her life, a vivid memory from the story he just played out. Here is the story of a noble family that sheltered Tilty, and how through her they all perished. A memory flared up in his soul. In the initial timeline of the game, his entire family was brutally slaughtered. And when he sees Tilty breaking down right before him, he realizes the tragedy he remembers. In fact, it was all about the Ranger family the whole time. He stands there watching as dark energy also envelops her. Tilty screams through tears, begging him to just drive her away and leave her alone before it's too late. Soul silently looks at her, his gaze fully focused in his eyes. It is clear the decision has already been made. He knows well that if he just walks away and stops contacting Tilty right now, then his family could really survive and avoid being killed. To save everyone from that terrible outcome would mean at least one less tragedy in this world. But the soul does not heed the risk and pulls her into a strong embrace, cutting through all the dark shadows. Tilty looks up at him in complete shock and can barely find the words to ask why he is still holding on. Shadow monsters rushed into the room with a loud eerie creak. But Soul does not flinch. His eyes are fixed on Tilty, even as they draw closer around them. Tilty breaks free from his hands, screams for him to stop, and shouts for him to let her go. Soul squeezes her tighter and says he will never let her go. He asks if it even matters that she makes him unhappy, then tells her that she is not alone, reminding her that now they both have parents and that he is always by her side. Soul smiles and says that she is already his dear sister and swears to protect her with his life. Finally, the words hit her and Tilty just breaks down, sobbing uncontrollably on his chest. She barely utters a choked "thank you" through heavy tears. Finally, she calls him her older brother, and the dark energy begins to dissipate in the room. Soul looks down at Tilty and calls her by name, noticing that the creepy dark energy has finally disappeared from the room. Someone's eyes widen shock at how everything changed so instantly. Tilty finally stops struggling and simply lets the tears flow, looking much calmer than just before. Soul looked at her with a gentle smile, relieved to realize that he really managed to reach her and stop the darkness. He thinks to himself, although he doesn't fully understand what kind of dark force it is, one thing he knows for sure: if it brings only trouble, he will not tolerate it. And suddenly his parents burst into the room. The father, shouting, asked what happened to Tilty, and the mother, looking at Soul, exclaimed, "What the hell just happened here?" Soul just looks both of them straight in the eyes and says, "I need a new sword." He has a serious expression on his face, and he says he must become much stronger than he is now. He swears that no matter what, he will protect Tilty and that he himself will deal with any darkness that dares to ruin her life. The mother froze in amazement, and the father can't suppress a half-smile. He was clearly impressed by the child's determination. Sold's father agreed to get him an incredible custom-made sword, and Sold is thrilled, thanking him. They looked at the city sword guest, and his father says he will introduce him to the best blacksmith in these parts. And in the shop, two boys in suits run out, shouting that they will never come back again. The blacksmith is not worried at all. He stands with a hammer in his hands and says to them, "Fine, goodbye," because they only care about fashion. She lifts her glasses and fires how much she hates the nobility, and Souls just looks at her, confident that he can conquer her. Determined to get that new blade at any cost, Sold sets off together with Tilty and his father straight to the city of Gast. The city is huge. It stretches all the way to the horizon, as far as you can see from the road. The streets are bursting with people and carriages rushing everywhere you look. Sold says how lively it is here, and his father explains that it is a major trading hub both on land and at sea, but he warns, although two noble families rule the city, all these crowds bring along many suspicious types. Sold's father looked down and asked Tilty to watch so she wouldn't get lost in the crowd, and Tilty nervously nods, promising she won't get lost. Sold reaches out and takes her by the palm, suggesting they just hold on to each other so they don't get lost among all these people. Tilty raises her eyes to him with a huge smile, blushing a little, and thanks the soul of her older brother for protecting her. Sold simply smiles in response, thinking about how much she has finally warmed up to him lately. When they walk through the crowded bazaar, he gratefully remembers that she herself asked to go with them, and it helped a lot because he just always wants to be near her so that she is safe wherever they go. But as they were walking, both seemed rooted to the spot, shocked by what they saw on the street. The street vendor simply conjures fire magic with his finger and grills meat as if it were nothing. Even children play tag, shooting fire and water at each other. And high above them, a girl simply flies on a broom across the sky to deliver a few bags. The city literally teems with magic. Vendors toast treats with their fingers, children just throw it around for fun. In the world of noblesse fantasia, it is quite obvious. Magic is a common thing, an everyday matter for most people. But Sold stands and tightly clenches his fist, and his father and Tilty see that he feels a bit out of place, his father tells him not to worry, not everyone is made for magic, and Sold just nods and thanks him. He gripped the sword hilt and firmly said that he does not need magic as long as he has a sword. After all, the style of the god-demon sword that he is mastering has its own unique and crazy power. Even if he has to admit to himself that he is still very far from true mastery. But Dad is pleased with their confidence and urges both of them, "Go already," to finally pick up your new equipment. They reach a large old-school workshop, and right above the entrance hangs a giant sword-shaped sign. And his dad loudly shouted, "Hello." Meanwhile, Sold looks around, checking if it is even open here because no one answers. From inside the shop, someone shouted that they are too noisy and asked who is there, so Sold's dad formally introduced himself as Baron Gallant Ranger. The one inside sharply replied that nobles can just go away, and this completely caught Sold and his dad by surprise. Dad hurriedly tries to explain that the master blacksmith actually forged a sword for him a long time ago, hoping that. Finally, the door opened, and a formidable woman with a huge hammer appeared. She sharply tells them that the old man is dead, and that now she is in charge here, so you'd better get lost. Dad begins to ask if she is the master's child, and she simply says her name is Frey, waves her hand and says, "See you," turning away. Sold suddenly spoke and told her that he was actually looking for his own sword. Frey looks back with a harsh, contemptuous gaze, calls him a cheeky nobleman's son, and tells him to go ask his dad for a toy sword instead. The soldier stood looking as if stung by a fence, and before he could utter a single word, the door slammed and the whole group froze in the dust. Soldier understands provoking an event to get a high-level weapon will not be easy at all. Meanwhile, his father panics and apologizes. He had no idea that the blacksmith's daughter had already started running the shop. He thinks they should just go and look for another place, although he is not sure if there is even one blacksmith in the city who really knows his craft. But Sold is not ready to give up yet and tells his father that he wants to try asking again, although the father tells him it's a bad idea. The boy just smiles and says it's okay, he really just wants to talk to her properly. The father agrees to go look for other shops and asks Tilty what she will do, so she decides to stay right here next to her older brother. They stand side by side in front of the closed door. Tilty looks quite nervous and asks why the woman back there behaved so frighteningly. Sol is not worried at all and only asks if she managed to see what was hiding in the back of the shop. Inside lay a pile of sturdy, heavy swords, proving that it was truly genuine. At first glance, the swords on the wall seem rough and massive, almost as if they were unfinished. But Sol feels something special in them. The blades have a quality that simply attracts him. He goes straight back into the forge where Frey is forging and decisively tells her that he really wants to have a serious talk. Tilty trembles behind his back and Frey turns around, completely irritated, asking why they think they can just barge in, but Sol only tells her that he has a request. He extends his sword to show her how damaged the hilt is, and Frey lifts her glasses to take a better look. Sol directly tells her that he needs a powerful sword, one that won't break even when he fights at full strength. Frey just looks at him completely confused and asks who the hell he is. He tells her that his name is Sol and that he needs this weapon to protect his sister. But barely have they finished when voices come from behind the door. Is this the place that kicked us out before? A huge man in armor named Mobrib bursts in, stomping and shouting that he is here by order of Lord Walger Debbie Hip and demands that they make the sword immediately. Sol exclaims in surprise. The mood suddenly changes. She rubbed her head and sighed. So it's one thing after another on this damned day. Mobrib stands in the doorway like a wall, but Frey does not back down. She tells him that her father always refused to make swords only for arrogant nobles. The stocky man becomes aggressive, leans toward her, and shouts that her father definitely once forged a blade for Lord Valger. Frey falls silent, looks down, her face shadowed. She quietly admits that he is right and her father really forged it, but it echoed, "Thank you very much, thank you very much, thank you very much, thank you very much. Thank you very much, 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 thank you very much. Thank you very much, 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 thank you very much. Thank you very much, thank you very much, thank you very much, thank you very much, thank you very much. Behind this is a dark reason. She tells how Valger blackmailed her father, saying he would do anything to save her daughter. This takes her back to the times when she was still a child. She remembers how her father taught her this craft every day when she was a child. Although he shouted that a sword is not just a beautiful ornament to admire, he always insisted that the blade is made only for battle. And he pointed to those beautiful, useless weapons and warned her, never dare to do something just for show. He asked her to forge only those swords in which she truly believed, and almost begged her not to repeat his mistakes. Frey looks at the memory of him behind the anvil and hears those words again. The sword is power, the belief he carried to the very end. Freya recalls her father, calling him a foolish old man who sacrificed everything just to protect her. Suddenly she realizes that is why now she must make a real choice. Frey shouted that she took her father's spirit to her heart and looked completely ready. She firmly stands her ground, clenches the hammer and swears she will never forge anything except real battle blades in which she believes. Hilti and Sol just look at her in complete admiration, seeing how the spark lights up in her again. But Mobrib only smiles at her ironically, as if she is talking about ancient times, because he believes swords are now almost useless. He does not calm down. He insists that only magic matters and assures one mage could easily destroy 100 people with swords. For him, a blade is just a fake magical staff or a shiny ornament that a nobleman flaunts. Mabra loses patience, grabs Frey by the collar and lifts her up, shouting that no one wants real weapons anymore. He leaned closer and whispered to her that Walger places great hopes on her father's old skills, so she better just shut up and get to work. Mabra looms over Frey, asking if she really wants to be threatened too, and that only makes her. Irritation grew inside her while she was trapped. Suddenly Sol steps forward and loudly shouts at the boy to stop. And he makes it clear, if anyone here really needs a real sword for battle, it is him. Frey just looks at him, stunned. She cannot believe this boy is taking her place. But Dobrib is not impressed at all, looks down on Sol and does not understand why some random kid is answering him. Without hesitation, the knight swings and sends the soldier flying across the room. Tilty shouts, calling her brother when Dobrib barked, "Watch your tongue or I'll just kill you." The soldier hit the floor dully, clutching his chest and feeling like a complete fool for letting his guard down like that. He looks up, eyes wide with surprise, because Tilty stands right in the face of the knight and shouts at him to stop hurting her older brother. Tilty loses her head. She sobs and screams that she will never forgive anyone who harms her older brother. She looks in horror as Mobrib grabs her and asks if she wants to die with him. Frey is right there, clutching the blacksmith's hammer. She calls the knight a complete bastard, and at that very moment, one soldier barely gets up and grabs one of the heavy blades from the shop floor. Frey shouts at him to put down her sword. But he ignores her, takes an ideal fighting stance, and lifts that huge weapon as if it were a feather. His eyes are sharp and cold. He decisively tells the knight to immediately take his hands off his sister, while they just stand confused, not understanding how such a runt can even swing such a heavy blade. Tilty keeps calling her brother all the time, and Mobrib just calls her a little bastard and looks at him through the helmet as if breaking him with a glance, and asks the guy if he really understands what kind of mess he is making. Without waiting for an answer, the knight rushes straight at him, shouting that he doesn't care if he dies. Mobrib laughs and says he has nothing to complain about, then releases a huge fireball he still holds. The utility worker just loses his head and screams as the heat from the explosion gets closer and closer. Zold remains completely calm amid the chaos because he begins to feel something as if he is right there. And at that very moment, while he is swinging, a strange feeling grows inside him. It is the power of Fenrir, the devilish beast he fought, and now he feels it. Energy fills his entire body, and he seems ready to put an end to this when he swings a heavy blade and a powerful wave of force rushes straight forward. The wave of the attack's pressure tore through the air and swept everything around. When Sold shouts his move, the wolf bursts out like lightning and cuts through the knight defense. Mobrib goes crazy and screams through his arm, not understanding what the hell is happening with that sword. Mobrib is completely stunned from the blow, and Frey keeps Tilty safe. Sold stands firm, thinking that the sword is essentially pure power. And he shouts that this is exactly the power he needs to protect the people he cares about. Frey is completely shocked by what the child just did. Meanwhile, Tilty shines because she knows that this is the end for the villains. Mobrib groans in pain, and his friend with glasses starts to panic, calling his name like. They both decide to run away from there as fast as possible. Mobrib swears while running, and his assistant begs to wait, leaving Sold and Tilty alone. Tilty rushes into his arms and sincerely thanks her older brother for everything. He just checks if she is okay, and she is glowing with excitement, says that the move was exactly the same as the one he used before, and Soul just smiles and agrees. Finally, everything falls into place because he remembers fighting that giant wolf Fenrir. Everything feels the same as back then. And it happened again when Mobrib grabbed her, and now everything fell into place for him. Suddenly he realizes the very desire to save Tilty is the secret of the Majin style, and he is just glad that she is safe. Finally, the cheap blade couldn't hold up, it broke right off the hilt. And Tilty begins to panic, shouting that the sword simply shattered into pieces. Sold looks at the powerless hilt and says, and this one didn't hold up, realizing that an ordinary sword is simply not made for the magical style. Both children jump up when they realize that Frey is standing right here, looking at them with crossed arms while she just looks at them with a terribly piercing gaze. Sold and Tilty instantly begin to bow and apologize, saying they are very sorry for damaging one of her swords. Frey says not to worry, she will make him a new one herself, and this completely caught him by surprise. She simply gave him a slight smile, lost in memories. She remembered the time when her father worked at the forge and told her that a sword is power. He whispered to her that it is the power a person needs to fight and remain true to their beliefs. When Frey's clocks diverged, he suddenly felt his conviction was real. He wants power only to protect what is important, so she decides to forge a blade worthy of this. And tells him directly that she will make a mighty sword that will never break, no matter how hard he uses it. She winked at them confidently and raised a finger, promising that she herself will see the matter through to the end. Sold cannot help but smile, in his thoughts only joy. Finally, he has a weapon that can withstand his god-demon style, and he happily thanks it. The children began shouting their thanks to her, and this made Frey pretend to be cool. She waved it off and said to drop all ceremonies and just call her Frey. The thought of the new weapon conquered and excited him. He definitely felt that this was exactly what was needed to reach a completely new level of power. We move to a huge mansion at the other end of the city. There everything is going much worse with. There he stands, hand in a bandage, and Lord Valgor shouts that any soldier who loses to a child will be immediately dismissed. Knight panics and begs her master to listen, insisting that the kitten they fought is something much more than an ordinary rascal. He explains that the boy fights with a sword as if it were real magic, and adds that there was also a silver-haired girl nearby. This completely shocked Valgor. In the mansion, Lord Valgar retells the rumor once again that they saw the girl with silver hair and his henchmen with mohawks laugh, saying, "Finally, the real excitement begins." A loud scream of genuine shock burst out from the forge, echoing all the way to the street because they sold. He cannot believe his ears and shouts that Frey cannot make a sword, and Tilty just looks surprised and asks her why. Frey stands reserved, calm, and repeats her words again, directly telling the children that she definitely cannot forge this weapon for them right now. She asks Saul if it is true that he cannot use magic, and he answers, yes, that is exactly why he trains so hard with the sword. Frey, thrusting a finger right into his face, sharply said that his special fencing style was actually their biggest problem. She says that even back when she watched him perform that icy wolf flash, she felt something deep in his technique. Something that felt like a huge wave of demonic energy, and then she continues saying, he essentially uses a magical stylia fighting method that draws power directly from a demon. She recalls an ancient scroll in which this style is described as a way to let dark power into the body to transform the entire soul into a living blade. Frey, with a sparkle in her eyes, tells that some fighters hold their swords like magic wands and cast spells through them. And even though Sold used the power of ice, she says that at first he was simply programming the blade. But everything flipped the moment he turned the sword itself into pure magic to perform his move. As if all the weapons were turning into an icy blade. She picks up the broken hilt and tells the children that her ordinary swords simply cannot withstand this task. She admitted that she never created them to endure such pressure or such a fighting style. Sold in panic asks what they should do now, and Frey calmly replies that it's simple. She tells them that they only need to find materials strong enough to withstand his power, and both children wonder what does she mean. Frey recalls one of their father's stories about a special stone that truly came from another world. A place called the Magic Dimension, an underground world teeming with magical beasts and overflowing with mana. Frey explains that a special ore from that dimension is so strong that it can withstand any demonic power. She steps back, bowing her head, her voice trembling with shock, and she repeats the name of the stone to herself. Sold is wildly excited and asks which exact stone is meant, but Frey just throws him a look and tells him to be quiet. Finally, she admits the thing they're looking for is called monostone. Night falls on the noisy city streets, and the group decides to return to where they stayed. They manage to get back in time to grab some food and discuss everything. Sold's father listened and nodded, finally understanding that to truly use this magical style, they need a legendary sword. Sold asked if such a weapon would really make his special fighting style a reality. Sold admits that it is possible, but says they still need a magical stone, and their father starts laughing at the fact that they are talking about this right now. And just as he realized how much that magic stone really costs, he suddenly lost control and splashed the drink everywhere. Dad Soiled still hasn't recovered from the shock, hoarsely asking if they are really serious, and Soiled looks around, scrutinizing whether Dad is really okay or about to lose it. Dad just looks back with a tense expression and tells both of them that what they are asking for is completely beyond his power. He begins to explain that magic stones are such extraordinarily rare things that you can't even find them for sale in an ordinary market. This simply shows that even a tiny fragment of one of those things is more valuable than any of the most expensive jewels. Sold looks quite depressed, recalling how Frey said the same thing, that they are impossible to find. Dad speaks directly. It definitely won't happen now, but he promises to try to find some other way to give them what they need. Night fell on the city and attention shifted to the reality of monastones. Even when it was just a game, legends were already circulating about them. They are incredibly hard to find. And when Sold and Tilty settle into their beds for the night, Sold absent-mindedly thinks how much simpler it was in the game, where you only had to constantly earn money. He just stares at the ceiling and feels the weight of everything pressing down on him, because attempts to realize this in real life turn into a real headache. Tilty turns over and tells him that she really hopes he can get those stones, and Soul just smiles in response and says he hopes so too. When they get comfortable, Tilty quietly calls Sold. He looks back, a little puzzled, and wonders what is wrong with him. She gives him a huge smile, thanks him for saving her, and says that he looked really cool back then. She giggles to herself and wishes him good night, still calling him little brother, which leaves. Sold lay there, his face glowing with a bright blush, and he felt extremely good about the whole situation. Looking at the moon, he mentally tells himself that since she is such a sweet villain, he is ready for anything. At that moment, he decided that he would go through any obstacles to make her happy. He promised to find a way to have those magical stones delivered the very next day. The next morning, Freykon sold the sword she had repaired for him and told them she would wait for their return. When the farewells were over, the group jumped into the carriage and set off on the long road back to the soldiers' village. But Sold's father looks somewhat sadly and apologizes that they actually did not bring a new sword today. Sold's father is still upset about the sword, but Sold tells him not to worry, he is just glad that they finally have a clear plan for what to do next. So his father returns to Tilty and asks if she managed to relax even a little after all the chaos. She gives him a big smile and says she definitely did. Meanwhile, he convinced himself that everything was going just wonderfully, and despite the troubles, it seemed to him that he had set all the necessary events in motion to eventually get that sword. Everything is calm until a sudden powerful explosion breaks through the side of the carriage. It throws the driver into the air. Father Sold screams loudly and Tilty squeals in horror. Sold tries to grab her as the whole world turns into fire and smoke. But the carriage is completely broken, smoldering on the roadside, and suddenly a pair of boots appears in the field of view. Dogra appears, joyfully shouting that he hit the target. He calls his men to enter, and the rest of the bandits instantly get going, shouting his name. Bandits approach the smoky ruins of the carriage with drawn swords. Dogra shoved his hand into the mess and pulled out Tilty, grabbing her by the back edge of the collar. He laughed and told his men that they finally got the treasure they had been chasing. Looking at the unconscious girl, he decisively said that he was returning straight to Lord Walger to take her. Dogra throws to the team, "I'm going, the rest of the cleanup is on you," and the bandits shout back that everything is already under control. Sold and his father sagged and lay completely out of themselves after the explosion. Walking through the quiet forest with Tilty over his shoulder, Dogra still cannot believe that this is a small child. He truly possessed such a crazy power, and at that moment realize, this is the power of darkness. Later, a voice came from the crystal ball informing Walger and Dogra, stealing this very power is Titan's main goal. Walger bows low and, trembling with nerves, asks his master, is it really about the power of darkness? The voice from the bullet explains that this power is both immense and terrifying. He says there is one person who can connect with such power that they will be able to conquer the whole world. And Brother Tilty looks coldly, explaining that this is the essence of being a priestess of darkness. The master reminds Valger that he has already failed twice to catch the girl, and the nobleman groans with shame. Valger seems about to lose it. He cannot understand how the girl managed to escape after the first murder of her mother. And then Dagoa recalls how she managed to break free a second time, even when Fenrir was unleashed on her. The voice from the bullet reminds Valger that this is already his third attempt, and they both bow. Looking into the master's eye through the glass, he gives them a direct order to bring the target back at any cost. And Valger explodes in panic, shouting that he will handle everything himself, leave it all to him. The master says, if you really manage, I will give you some of that dark power so that it will be yours. Valger laughed, what a great honor this is, and promised that this time they will definitely catch them. Meanwhile, Tilty wakes up and repeats the name Priestess of Darkness, sounding completely lost, and she asks confusedly where she is. Dagra, holding her under the arm, hisses at her, shut up if you don't want to die. But she listens to no one and starts screaming, demanding to know what happened to her father and brother. Dogra just stands with a sly smile on his face and quietly makes a sound, before cold-bloodedly telling Tilty that he is the one who killed her family. Tilty's look says it all. She is completely shocked by this news. She starts screeching at the top of her lungs, but Doggo just carries her through the forest like luggage, grumbling that she is too loud and needs to shut up. She can do nothing, only sob and tear out a loud scream of pain, so Dogra got even angrier and barked at her that he already told her to shut up. Suddenly he froze mid-word, completely puzzled by what he saw. Dark energy bursts from beneath the ground and spirals upward like water, and Dogora starts to panic and screams to find out what the hell is happening when Tilty raises her gaze, with tears in her eyes, says she will make life unbearable for everyone. Dagura is in complete shock. He realized that the power coming from her is much stronger than he expected. A furious dark energy wraps around Tilty from all sides, and she begins to change. And Dagura feels the darkness melting right into his body and making his eyes as black as night. As the power surges through his arms, veins bulge. He says it's incredible and lets out a loud roar as his muscles double in size, so he shouts that the darkness is absolutely the best, while a huge vortex of black energy engulfs Tilty. The one who is watching from the side finally understood. Her darkness fuels the power, that's why they want her. The dog either just laughs maniacally and asks, damn it, what that guy is even doing here. He demands to know what happened to all his people down the hill, but Soul just remains focused. Even puffing and gasping, he thinks about how he was too careless. He had no idea they would be so aggressive, especially since his dad was already lying unconscious from the cart strike. Solda's dad lies on his back near the cart and thinks about how he really let them down. He wasn't ready for this. Even wounded, he raises his eyes and decides that enough of playing nice, there will be no more mercy for him. These guys, meanwhile, he focused, realizing that it doesn't matter when it happens or who he is facing, because if anyone even thinks of touching Tilty, he will make them regret it. He is completely focused on this threat. And with a look of pure rage, he swears to himself that he will cut down every one of them. Dogger just laughs at the guy standing before a huge vortex of dark energy and says that Moblib was right, he really is special. And then he flexed his pumped muscles and told Sold not to underestimate him, calling him a little bastard. He got right in Saul's face with a sly smile, shouting that the Priestess of Darkness now belongs to the Titans and he keeps saying that they will take very good care of her. Obviously he has some sick plan. And while Tilty screams as she is consumed by shadows, Dagura laughs ominously, saying she is essentially just a human drug that enhances their power. Soul is silent, just grips his sword and steps forward with a look that says, "The games are over." Dagoa loses his temper and yells at the guy to just burn to ashes, then throws a colossal punch powered by all that dark energy. But Sold is too fast. He flashed by like a blurred silhouette and swung his blade past as if it were nothing, and before that, the giant might even react. Sharp blade strikes cut through the air and knock him off his feet, leaving only "thank you." The dog either completely froze in his steps, stuck mid-swing, and the air around him suddenly became ice cold. Sold simply keeps walking and sheathes his sword, while Dagger stands completely bewildered and asks, "What just happened?" But suddenly he starts to panic, letting out a pitiful scream as he feels ice crawling up his body. He sobs and begs for it to stop, but the frost advances too quickly and he can do nothing. And within seconds he is almost buried under ice, barely squeezing out a last whisper for help as his eye fills with fear. Sold finishes sheathing the blade and steps behind him. The ice wolf leaves the dog, or the one who turned into human ice cream. Sold looks with a cold gaze, as if warning everyone that there will be no mercy for those who touch Tilty. While Dagoa stands there like a statue, his face completely freezes in a block of ice. Having stepped away from the mess, the Sold heads move toward a huge sphere swirling with dark energy, and he stretches out both hands, smiles kindly, and tells the one inside that everything is fine now. He calls Tilty, asks her to come to him, and she emerges from the shadows with eyes full of tears. She can't hold back and screams, calling her older brother when he finally breaks through the darkness. She rushed forward, throwing herself into huge embraces, and he caught her right on the spot. Pressing her to himself, Soul tells her that whatever she feels, fear or despair, he will definitely save her, swears that he will never let her down. Tilty continues to sob on his chest and he whispers to her, "Hold on, don't let the darkness take over." Sold tightly presses Tilty to himself and whispers that he is sorry for everything, but she simply responds with hugs and whispered thank you to her older brother for saving her, just before her body completely gave out in his arms. Sold finally realizes she fainted from stress and looks exactly the same as last time. He stands and thinks about the Titans, knowing that they are still out there hunting that dark force. Just then voices came from the forest. They said he knocked down Dagger with one blow, and that suddenly a group of knights in armor bursts in and announces that they are from the House of Hartman. The leading knight says they are here to take Sold back, but he won't tolerate it and thunders, "What the hell?" In fact, this is happening. The scene shifts to a huge mansion bathed in moonlight. It turns out that the Hartman house is one of the two great noble families that hold the town of Gas in their hands. Knights introduced the boy as Lord Sold, son of the Ranger family, and everyone watched. The group arrives at the Hartman estate, where a smiling man at the table welcomes Sold and says he is finally glad to meet him. And he introduces himself, Reich Hartman, head of the entire family, while he stands and looks by the beds where Sold's father and sister lie, explaining that a doctor has already come to treat them. He tells Sold that he can finally breathe easy, they are safe, but when the boy looks at Tilty, he suddenly realizes relaxing is the last thing he can do now, and the thought seems completely impossible. And the reason why he is so tense is very simple. Looking at Reich, he suddenly realized this guy is actually a character from the game Noblesse Fantasia, and that means he is dealing with one of the main heroes of the original story, and that is a big problem. Because in the very world of the game, Reich is the very person destined to stand against and overthrow the villain Tilty. Sold sits on the couch completely tense. He knows that Reich and his family were supposed to become enemies much later, so their times simply do not align. And although he is sure he did the right thing by saving them, he cannot shake the anxiety. What is really happening behind the scenes? Those 3 nights in the forest come to his mind again when they said they had only come to take him, and he is amazed. Why do they just appear at that perfect moment to save the day? It's a bit too convenient. He looked at Reich sitting there with his soldier standing guard nearby, and suddenly realized this is a major turning point in this story. Sold recalls from the game that Reich is a brilliant tactician who always thinks 3 moves ahead. And he definitely knows this man is not the type to help others just out of kindness. It hits him. He understands that by saving Tilty's life, he completely rewrote her fate and created a whole new timeline. Where Tilty's family survived instead of dying, so Reich meets her as a child, rather than encountering her at the academy years later. Looking at Reich's calm face, Sold cannot get rid of the thought, what is this master tactician really planning to do next? Reich says that his family is closely watching Dagura, that very boy Sold and just defeated, who. This shocks the boy, but Reich immediately explains that Dagura is actually the boss of the city's criminal world. This guy was involved in all the heavy stuff from smuggling to human trafficking. And although Reich tried more than once to make him answer for his actions, he never gets caught. His powerful support always makes all the accusations dissolve. When Sold asks what exactly he means by support, Reich just looks seriously and confirms. So here it is. Behind all this stands Walger Debihip, the head of a noble family that together with the Hartmans rules the city. Just utter this name and the soul remembers how Walger's thugs persistently demanded a commissioned sword. And how that nobleman even threatened Frey to force her father to give in back then. It makes Reich conclude that this man is a true villain who uses the townspeople to get rich. Reich lowers his eyes and sadly admits, although everything looks bad, they have no real evidence linking that nobleman to Dogger's gang, which makes one of his knights lose his composure. He explodes, shouting that the whole city already knows, that dude is a complete piece of shit. Another knight tells him to quiet down, and Reich adds, knowing the truth is nothing if no one can do anything. Sold looks away to the side and finally begins to understand how deeply corruption has taken root in this city. He looks him straight in the eyes and asks if his real plan is to finally overthrow Walgura once and for all. At first Reich says nothing. He simply throws a sharp, piercing glance at the boy through his glasses while his knights just stood behind, looking completely baffled by the child's direct question. Sold does not calm down and says that Reich has probably been watching Dogra all this time, gathering evidence to destroy that nobleman. And seeing how much this boy understood, a slight smile begins to appear on Reich's face. He looks at Sold and sincerely says he is surprised the boy is right about everything. Reich explains, on the surface the Hartman and Divichip families are supposed to rule the city together, as if in complete harmony, but he admits that it is all just a big show, and in reality both families are just waiting for the right opportunity to tear each other apart. Reich warmly tells how his family has always grown side by side with the town of Gas. And while his knights look on with pride, he says the true treasure of his house is the people who live here. He sharply makes it clear, if they want to protect everyone, they cannot allow someone like Walgura to defeat them. Sold sits with T, completely stunned because this dude, like or whatever, turns out to be full of surprises. The boy remembers that in the original game Reich always seemed so sarcastic and cynical. And he even recalls how Reich constantly told everyone to show absolutely no mercy to the enemies of the Hartman house. Sold looks at him and wonders if this guy is really just a very passionate person deep down. If all this time he was just trying his best to fulfill his duty as a young lord. Reich asks Sold if the guy he beat Dagura really went after his sister, to which Sold nods and says, yes. And he adds that that little dog somehow returning his sister belongs to a group called Titan. Reich says he thought so, and his knights are completely shocked, while Sold remains guessing what he means until it turns out the Titans are a giant shadow organization secretly controlling everything in the global criminal underground. No one knows when they appeared or who really leads them. They are a dangerous group shrouded in complete secrecy. Reich looked serious and admitted he already had a bad feeling, as if Valger was involved with those people. He explains that Valger for some reason is going to use the Sold sister. And handing her over would definitely help Walger rise in the ranks and become even closer to the organization. If that happens, corruption in the city will only worsen and turn everything into violent chaos where no one will be safe. Reich stands there and swears he will not allow this to happen at any cost, so they need to act swiftly to stop him. Reich stands by the window, turned with his back, and tells Saul that he actually has a proposal for him, and Sold repeats the word in response. He looks a bit surprised until he realizes that this proposal must be the very reason Reich was the first to contact them, so he looks him straight in the eyes and asks what is really going on. Memory turns into a real nightmare. Bandits storm the town, rob it, and set it on fire. Inside the house, Tilty's mother whispered, "Run," staying behind to buy some time. She warns her a terrible darkness is coming and they are coming right for her. But she gently touches Tilty's face and tells her that everything will be fine, even if that darkness is exactly what hurts her. She promises someday a light will definitely appear that will forever sweep away all that darkness. Tilty must move forward no matter how bad it is, even when she cries and calls for her mother. Tilty suddenly wakes up in bed with tears in her eyes and calls for her mother after that tense sleep. Tilty finally opens her eyes but is completely confused and asks where she is at all. The nurse standing by the bed says that she has already woken up and explains that they are now at the heart minute stage. Tilty noticed her father in the neighboring bed and shouted to him, but the nurse asked her to calm down and said that if Tilty quiets down and rests a little, everything will be fine. Tilty, looking at the large house in the moonlight, asks where her brother has gone, and the nurse quietly replies that he is busy now, probably consulting with Lord Rake, the one who manages the estate. Someone stepped firmly forward down the corridor, as if appearing out of nowhere at the very moment when he was most needed by her. Whatever happened, he stood right in front of her. And Tilty suddenly realizes, just as her mother promised, he is really nearby to protect her. She rushes to the office, throws open the door and calls her older brother, looks at Sold standing there and cannot help but think of him as the light that saved her. But the mood instantly changes when she hears Sold tell the Lord that he wants the Hartman family to shelter Tilty and protect her. Tilty stands there, frozen. The idea that she might be left behind caught her by surprise. She looks at him with tears in her eyes and asks what he is even talking about. But he just looks at her and says that she came just in time. Sold raises his head, completely stunned. Tilty is standing in the doorway and he shouts her name. He calmly sits at the table and quietly tells Tilty that her father is resting and that he has already dealt with this situation together with Sold. Without unnecessary words, he sharply warned Tilty, Valgar, the main star of the city, has targeted her specifically. He adjusts his glasses and admits the threat is real, but he still doesn't understand why that man is after her. But since Valgar is a high-ranking nobleman, he is the kind who can easily frame her with false accusations just to get his way. The situation turned out to be even worse than they thought. If Valgar goes after her, he could simply destroy the entire Ranger village. Tilty and Sold remained standing in complete silence as the weight of danger finally overwhelmed them. Like explains that this is exactly why the Hartman family wants to take her away. It is the only way to protect her from him. He looks into her eyes and makes it clear that he is doing this not just to be kind to her. In fact, all of this is for the protection of everyone who lives with her at home, so they don't end up caught in the crossfire. Tilty is in complete shock from the news, barely able to utter a single word. She looks at Sold, eyes filled with tears, calling her older brother because she doesn't know what to do. Sold does not back down and says it as if he finally understood what game he is playing. He says that although the offer looks like help, there is actually a much bigger goal behind it. He does this to make sure that he is in a stronger position than Valgar. They keep Tilty under the roof of the Hartman family, so they hold the same person whom Valgar desperately wants to capture. And for someone like Valgar, almost nothing is as irritating as ending up in such a mess. Because Valgar wants to make sure he returns Tilty safe and sound, his hands are almost tied. This means he cannot afford any careless move or clash with the Hartmans, otherwise he will lose everything. Sold understands that actually fully controls the situation here. He can be as aggressive as he wants, and Valgar just has to sit and endure. Sold looked at Tilty and realized, for that guy, Tilty is nothing more than a bargaining chip. As if he notices that Sold is reading him and understands that he will have to be on guard next to that guy. Tilty just stands and looks completely lost while the two of them talk about her future. And Sold begins to count all the options in his head, thinking only about how to protect her. He wonders, wouldn't it be better just to leave her with sympathy and go his own way? As he just have to protect her with his own strength, he decides that the best move is to accept the deal. He clenches his fist and thinks about which path will truly make her happy and whether he can even make it happen. Finally, Sold bows his head as if he really understood and asks him to take good care of his sister. Tilty starts crying and calls him, "Why is this happening? Why are you leaving me behind?" Sold doesn't say a word, he just looks at the floor, hiding his face while considering his choice. Like promises, the Hartman family will protect Tilty with everything they have. Sold bows his head and says, "Thank you." He adds that he has one condition before they make any final decisions. With a huge smile, Sold asks to be taken right on the spot, and next to him Tilty looks completely surprised. Just looks at him in response, as if stunned by the child's request. Even the knight behind them cannot hide how shocked they are. Sold recalls the promise he made to himself. He knows that he will truly have to protect her. Tilty finally smiled widely and happily, looking at him. Sold just confidently winked at her, as if saying that everything was under his control. Like froze for a moment, just watching how they interacted while you. Finally, he twisted a smile and repeated that he would have stayed only to protect his sister, and sounded quite impressed. Like says he is for this plan, but first he has to agree everything with someone else. It turned out that it was his younger sister. Sold is clearly stunned that the sister is involved here, and Tilty seems to have hung on the word discuss, as if saying let's. Like asks if they are not against it. Sold says yes, but wonders why is the master of the house not the one who decides. Like strictly orders both of them to just stay in the mansion and rest until Sol's father gets back on his feet. And later that night, the sound of boots tapping on the floor was heard, as if. He enters the bedroom and calls the girl named Celuria. She is just sitting on the bed, covered with plush toys, and without raising her eyes from the book, she asked her brother if he had found the girl he was looking for. Like slyly smiles at her and says that he did, confirming she is securely fixed with him, as she said. He tells her that her strange power of clairvoyance worked 100% and caught her exactly where she predicted. Celuria quietly sits on the bed, the girl who seems to hold the key to the entire future of the Hartman family. She says that finding Tilty is good news, but adds that there is actually one more thing he needs to be told. He says that next to Tilty stands a noble boy who is actually offering to work for their family, which, I am curious, did Celuria also see him in her visions, but she says she does not know who that boy is at all. Looking deeper with her clairvoyance, she suddenly realizes that in the seen future there is no soul resembling the boy at all. Like takes this as a warning signal and says he will simply refuse the boy, but when. While the moon hangs over the estate, Celuria asks her brother to wait a moment because she is sure there is definitely something wrong with that child. She explains that Sold is the first person she has ever met whom her powers cannot see at all. She is convinced that behind the fact that he suddenly appeared in their house out of nowhere, there must be some great reason. Sold stands smiling and wonders, is he really some special being, as Celuria believes? But Celuria is still watching him closely, trying to understand will he bring success to her family or complete destruction. She decides that she herself will judge him, meanwhile. In the middle of nowhere, a dark rift opened and began tearing the air. It turned out it was still too early to celebrate because this creepy dark hole just lurked in the forest and radiates very bad energy. Returning to the estate, Sold gradually gets used to the new life. He becomes an apprentice to the guardian in the Hartman family. And he is simply delighted Tilty officially moves into the mansion and will now live with them. He says that his father was just stunned by all this, but still gave them permission to stay. Garland stands with his arms crossed over his chest and tells the boy that he will explain everything to his mother himself. Sold simply thanks him for having their backs. Garland explains that for provincial nobles like them, getting into the circle of influential families is a true blessing, but that's not all. He tells Sold that this is a huge opportunity for both of them, and the boy can only wonder what opportunity is his father even talking about. Sold suddenly suggested finding a magical stone, and just the mention of it completely caught Garland off guard. It turned out that such things don't even appear on the open market, so now their only real chance to get one is to have connections with the house of some big star. Sold nods, everything just clicked for him. He knows that if they only manage to get the magical stone, finally they can get a real sword, forged specifically for battle. The goal is to get a blade specifically for Majin's style, something sturdy that can truly withstand that level of power. Because if Sold can pull that off, he knows he will definitely become much stronger than he is now. Garland bows low, prepares to leave, and says to Lord Rake, I leave 2 children in your hands. Rake reassures Garland, don't worry and have a safe journey back, while the children on the sidewalk wave goodbye as they walk away. He was completely focused on his main mission to be Tilty's personal guard. He knows as long as Valga is still targeting her, she can't really go outside, but in every other way she is almost free to do whatever she wants. Life in the estate has been easy lately. It all started with the wonderful meals they were served every day. Even the time they spend immersed in books in the library. Tilty finally also has time for fun playing with the dogs outside while Sold watches over. And then Sold realizes that he has truly gone the whole week without any serious problems. But then, He notices Celuria hiding behind the walls and looking at them defiantly, as if she has been doing this for several days. He hasn't taken his eyes off her for a week and is beginning to understand better who she really is. Turns out she is Celuria Hartman, a sister character from that game he remembered. Seeing her just standing there, Sold begins to wonder if he should finally approach and talk to her. Tilty gets there first and exclaims, seeing Celuria peeking from behind the corner. Tilty looks her straight in the eyes and simply asks, "Why do you always watch me from the shadows?" Celuria just stands, her face blank, looking directly at Tilty as if looking through her. Suddenly, a strange spiral pattern flickered in Celuria's eye, and she reacted as if she had just realized something huge. Out of nowhere, Celuria dashed forward and threw herself into Tilty's arms, leaving Sold standing behind completely confused. Celuria commandingly says to Tilty, "You need to come to my room right now," and Tilty is so bewildered that she can't even understand what is happening. Celuria says they need to talk and sharply pulls Tilty away, while Sold tries to rush between them and ask what is going on. Like intervenes and convinces Sold that there is no need to worry about them, so Sold instead pays attention to him. Like sincerely apologizes for how selfish his sister behaves and asks Sold to just be patient with her a little. He says that as soon as Celuria becomes like that, nothing can stop her anymore, and this makes Sold wonder what he really means. Around the estate it is quite calm. The dogs, as always, are just running on the grass. Sitting over tea, Like begins to inspiredly explain the power of Celuria and how it is essentially a blessing for the entire Hartman family. Sold is amazed by this blessing as already mentioned and explains, the power of Celuria has saved him so many times that he even had to ask her permission before hiring Sold. As the sister of calls the guiding light for their entire family, and at that very moment Sold finally puts everything together. He remembers who Celuria is from the game. He recalls how she became his guide every time he got stuck, and during the game an old legend about winds leading the way into the unknown comes to his mind. Sold tensely tries to piece everything together, remembering that her special ability is to show people the exact path they need to take. It is a rare gift, as if it gives her the power to look into the future. Sold suddenly realizes that she really is like a sister and begins to ask for details, but Like stops the conversation, apologizing and saying that her power is a strictly family secret. He simply says that her power is special, and this only strengthens his firm belief. She definitely has that clairvoyance he remembers from the game. He can only guess what exactly her eyes are seeing now. Next to him stands a tray with cupcakes and sandwiches, ready for a snack, surrounded by a pile of plush toys. And the girls are just hanging out in a room full of plush toys, while Celuria and Tilty have arranged a private tea party away from the boys. Tilty looks a bit uncertain as they spend time together and cautiously asks Celuria. But Celuria just stares with empty eyes and tells Tilty to drop the formalities, because those honorable addresses are just a big hassle. Tilty asks why she was even brought into this room, and Celuria only says that she noticed them talking and decided to bring her here. Celuria adds that she always follows what she sees because it never makes mistakes, and Tilty is completely confused by this. What exactly is this seeing? A piercing look flashes in Celuria's eyes as she explains that everything she does is for the sake of the one she considers a brother. The two of them just sit among all those plush toys, sharing a quiet moment together. Celuria asks if Tilty is on her side, and Tilty thinks in surprise, "Does this mean we are officially friends now?" Celuria broke into a huge, sincere smile and began to tell how much she truly loves her older brother. This makes Tilty look away to the side, and she quietly admits that she loves her brother's soul no less. Her face darkens a little, and she says that actually everything she does only brings him a lot of trouble. Tilty looked at her and said that she also wants to help her older brother, just like Celuria helps her brother. And Celuria simply looks back, her eyes are finally clear and focused. Celuria reassures her, everything is perfectly normal as long as she has will, she will be able to accomplish it, and Tilty wonders if it is all just about her feelings. Tilty suddenly realized, once she wanted that too, at that very moment her magic finally awakened. She was dreaming of power to save her brother while the two girls sat there together. Celuria begins to remember how in childhood she was always daydreaming, but her older brother was always nearby. And since their parents were always busy, he was the one who took care of her and treated her with such tenderness. Even when their parents died in a terrible accident, he hugged her tightly and promised, "I will protect you and our home at any cost." Celuria was glad he was near, but really wanted to find a way to help him, and suddenly, at the very moment she made that wish, her special power finally awoke. These strange visions suddenly began to intrusively enter her mind as if from nowhere, again and again. Just remember. Scattered random fragments of the future snippets of what was meant to happen, primarily about the Hartman family. And one of those visions really saved them when a huge stone crashed down right where they were standing. It turned out that all these flashes of the future were the sole reason why her brother remained safe, but Celuria sincerely admits she does not know when her clairvoyance will work and what it will show her. She knows only one thing for sure: every person and every event that happens on her path ultimately help her brother. That is why she then rushed to act, sitting in a room full of plush toys. He asked to move into the forest south of Gasta to save a girl from a guy with a mohawk. Immediately recognized the name Dogger and promised her that he would handle everything himself. Only two appeared in her vision, a little girl and a man with a mohawk. But when that moment finally came, Sold appeared nearby and everything turned upside down. Celuria sits in her room, surrounded by toys, and excitedly tells Tilty how she sees the shape of the soul. Tilty just looks and says that only she can truly decide such things for her brother. As if standing alone, looking at the lights and wondering if these new people are really friends or just another group of enemies to deal with. The next day the sun rose over the Hartman estate. And while Sold and Tilty walk the corridors, Tilty nods and says she still hasn't seen Celuria nearby. She is terribly confused. Celuria told her that her powers do not at all allow her to see Sold. Sold suddenly stops and thinks, how does her magic work, especially her clairvoyance, end? Finally it dawns on him that for some reason Celuria actually does not see what awaits him in the future. Before he could grasp this, the guard shouted, "Princess," and both children jumped. Sold asks what is going on, and the guard shouts in panic that Lady Celuria has completely disappeared. One of the senior guards is in total panic and desperately says that all the vassals are already scattering across the kingdom in search of the princess. Tilty calls her brother and Sold approaches, assuring that the two of them will also help in the search. In the manor courtyard, guards run everywhere and shout because the search for Celuria is becoming more and more intense. But high up at the very edge of the roof, Celuria stands alone and thinks about what the future she saw turned out to be. Before, she was always led on the right path, although now she looks quite nervous about what will happen next. She slowly moves her boot closer to the edge, confident that this moment was destined for her to see. Standing at the highest point of the manor, she looks at the sea of clouds as the wind intensifies. Suddenly she jumps right off the edge, stretching out her hand, telling herself she will just do everything she can. Falling, she simply closes her eyes and surrenders to it, looking completely calm until suddenly a soul appears out of nowhere on the roof and grabs her hand, saving her from falling before something terrible could happen. Sold, grabbing Celuria, shouts her name. He is completely panicked and asks what she is doing. Celuria just looks at him with an empty, confused expression. She does not understand at all why he is here. That vision surfaces again. She is falling through the sky, completely alone, because in the vision of the future she saw, Sold was nowhere nearby to help her. She tells him she was just following her vision, which he looks completely bewildered. She says that in every single version of the future she has ever seen, the only way to truly save her brother is to make that jump. Sold is completely stunned, barely able to trying to say a word, being below as if on guard or losing his mind, shouting it so loudly that someone would look back because he is still hanging on the edge. And Sold growled at her, "If something happens to you, I would be completely broken." They stand together on the roof. Sold looks disappointed, and Celuria just stares into the distance. But she only insists more strongly, firmly saying that everything that has to be done is for the sake of making the right future a reality. Standing on the high roof, the soldier shouts, demanding to know what she even means by the right future. He does not calm down, again and again asking if she really thinks that for the sake of some destined path. He just has to sit and watch those he loves sink into despair or meet a tragic end. Celuria does not say a word. She just stands, tears rolling down her face while the soldier shouts that under no circumstances will he accept anything like that. He tightly squeezes her hand and says that the future is not decided, you build it yourself here and now. Celuria's eyes open wide. She was completely shocked by his words because finally everything falls into place for the soldier, and he suddenly understands why she could never see his future in her visions. Because he is a reincarnate who does not exist in the original scenario of this world. And although that Sold Ranger was supposed to be killed in the game, he stands here completely alive. So Old stands on the edge of the roof and shouts that he will create his own future, as if understanding that he no longer has a ready-made script. And finally he notices them and shouts, "Celuria," who turns around and calls her older brother in response. He runs up and hugs her tightly. It is clear that he is completely relieved. The main thing is that she is safe and unharmed. Like looks at her reproachfully and calls her a fool for such recklessness, but it is clear that he is actually just worried. Siluria simply remains silent, pressing into the embrace. Tears are still rolling down her face. Finally, she finds her voice and tells her brother that she regrets everything that happened. Like turns his gaze to the boy and sincerely tells Sol that he is grateful to him. He admits that he actually heard the entire conversation that Sol had with Siluria earlier. Like agrees with him and says that the future is truly what they must create for themselves today. He decides to take a decisive step right here and now. He offers reliable and official positions with the Hartman family, no longer just a student. Sol raised his gaze and pure admiration shone on his face as he ran. He extends his hand to shake Lake. Like tells him to just call him Reich from now on, and Sol happily agrees while Siluria watches as they grow closer. Like looks at him with deep respect and tells Sol that he is the savior of his sister and their entire home. Sol just stands there with a proud smile, basking in this moment until one of the knights gallops shouting, "Young master," and Lake only asks to calm down. Siluria is safe, and he sighs with relief because she is fine. But the night is not over yet. He reports another problem. A rift suddenly opened in the southern forest. Lake and Sol froze, and Lake exploded with a scream in complete shock at this news. The mood changes instantly as the light takes on such a tense appearance, as if saying, finally the day has come. Sol asks in panic if it is a real rift and mentally realizes this is exactly what happened in the game. Lake says everything when a portal to the demon world has just opened. The sky literally tears in half, and the night screams that a flare begins from the magical dimension, a rupture that. But the soul recognizes it instantly. He froze, looking at the crack in the sky, and understood this is the huge chance he needed. He finally dares to make his move. The voice of Frey flashes in his mind. The magical dimension is a world of beasts and pure energy, which the only place where magical ore can grow so strong that it withstands any spell. These ores are magical stones, which Sol is after because he knows he will have to get the magical stone sword if he wants to have. True strength is the one that truly matters. For him, the sword is the only way to protect those he cares about. He is ready for anything so that Tilty gets a better future, glancing at the rift at that moment. A huge breakthrough into the magical dimension stands there like a wound on the world. It is essentially. This is a completely different world, teeming with Maneth's source of all magical power, creating an absolutely unique and dangerous ecosystem that does not follow any rules of the human world. In this world, all wild beasts and plants feed entirely on mana. And it turned out that moderate amounts of mana simply become magical power. In usual doses, it doesn't even affect people. But when mana levels exceed what the body can endure, severe dizziness and nausea occur, which only. And then everything only gets worse. In the worst case, that much mana can kill. Like says that according to reports, the mono concentration inside this magical dimension is simply off the charts. To prevent anyone from being poisoned by mana, he decides that only he and the elite with a large mana reserve will go inside. Like returns to the team and asks Zweig and Audrey if they are ready to move, and they shout that they are ready while Zweig smiles widely and says to the young gentleman, "I will cover you." Audrey steps forward with full dedication, saying that his whole life belongs to the Hartman house. Finally, like tells Eyes the estate remains in his hands, and the commander tells him not to worry about anything. Sol carefully reviews the area's indicators, studying the levels of magical power and the concentration of magic. It's like in a game, you can only enter the dungeon with level 20 just to step over the threshold, because the concentration there is so insane that anyone too weak won't even be able to enter, which this makes Sol realize how truly important high concentration is, and he begins to worry whether this place will become insanely dangerous. Just then, Like tells him that you absolutely cannot take a child into such a magical dimension. Sol explodes, thinking that he is being left behind. But he suddenly stops and says that this is just what he would usually say to a child, and Sol just stands completely confused. So he glanced at the team and said that Sol is definitely not like other children. Then he looks for support from others. Zweig immediately bursts in, reminding everyone how that guy knocked down Daguro with one blow. Audrey agrees and says that the icy sword mastery radiated stunning power. And here Annie intervenes. Even if the guy himself does not possess magic, this magical sword will be a huge help to the team. Like admits that it is still hard to believe, but he cannot help but notice his three best elites all vouch for him. He looks him straight in the eyes, says that it is dangerous there, but still asks if he will lend them his power. Sold throws himself headlong, shouts yes, and agrees to help with the raid in the dungeon. He thinks that if only he obtains the magic stone there, he will finally be able to create a sword that will not break when he uses all his power. But before they set off, he turns to Tilty and, a little worried about leaving her, calls her by name. He just looks back at him and smiles with such a calm, gentle smile. Tilty tells him not to worry about her while he is gone, and this completely caught Sold by surprise. She says that Saluria and others will be nearby to protect her, and Saluria simply makes a peace gesture. Sold pulled Tilty into an embrace and promised her that he definitely will not lose, he has a promise to fulfill. The whole squad silently watched as Tilty looked at him and said that while he is gone, she herself will work on becoming stronger. For a moment they just stand there, smiling and trusting each other. Finally, Tilty, Saluria, and all the others wave goodbye to the group as it sets off into the magical realm. The team is fired up and ready to go. Sold, and the knights set off. A horse-drawn carriage leaves the city of Gast behind and heads towards the southern forest. The group makes their way deeper into the dense, overgrown forest. The path becomes increasingly difficult. As they walk, Sold looks around and asks if such things happen here often. But he himself admits it's also the first time for him, saying that the demonic dimension is actually just some random chaos. He adds these rifts occur completely by chance and just keep expanding. And as soon as those openings appear, all kinds of terrifying magical monsters start bursting out of them. If they just leave it as it is, the whole area will turn into a pile of trash, and all the inhabitants will be in trouble. Though they really have no choice, they must close the rift before everything gets much worse. Like says that this crack appeared right in the middle of his family's holdings. He doesn't stop talking as they walk, explaining that if this rift ruins everything, his family will pay for it. And since the opposition definitely won't just leave it like that, Sold suddenly asks if he means Walter de Vihib. Like confirms this, saying that Walter will definitely try to ruin Hartman's name for bringing danger to the city. Mostly he does it simply to say that they are no longer fit to govern the city of Gast. When they pass the waterfall, Lake mutters that although these demonic dimensions are a complete hassle, they do have one advantage. Here it is an incredible, just insane amount of rare resources waiting for them inside. He enthusiastically talks about strange plants, monster materials, and ores that are simply unattainable in the human world. It is so profitable that some nobles even pray for these rifts to open just to get rich. But he adds, all that money only matters when you are truly strong enough to cleanse this place. Just at that moment, several guards noticed them, shouted that they had been waiting, and led them forward. Finally, the group reaches a huge fissure, a jagged crack hanging in the air that marks the entrance to the demonic dimension. Sold looks around, a strange premonition arises in his chest. He asks if this is really the place he thinks it is, and one of the knights replies, exactly. This is exactly the place where not long ago they sold a dog, forced it to fight, and beat it. The energy around the rift is heavy, like a giant maw waiting to swallow them whole. Sold cannot shake the feeling that something is wrong here and wonders if it is really just a coincidence that the rift opened right here. And he says that they really received messages about the dog or about its frozen body, which disappeared from this very place. Mobrib confirms this. When the soldiers managed to come and check, the body was already gone. In its place opened some kind of crazy rift. Dweig tries not to panic, says don't worry, Dogra is definitely dead, and she asks Saul to back her up. Sold says that everyone saw how it happened, but probably Walter sent someone to take the body and cover up the traces. The mystery still lingers in the air. Everyone tensely tunes in, and Likes gives the signal. The team finally goes inside. Like shouts, finally time to end the demonic dimension, and the whole team lets out a loud scream as they head into the rift. Returning to the manor, Saluria asks Tilty about that dark power she mentioned, and Tilty says, since childhood her magic rebelled every time she got sad. Mom called it the power of darkness, which honestly sounds pretty scary. Tilty admits she can't control it, and usually just loses consciousness when it starts. She takes matters into her own hands, looks away, and says she is sure this strange power of hers brings only misfortune. Everyone she really cares about, Saluria looks at her for just a second, then tells her, this power itself is not bad, people just decide what to use it for. And she understands it once her own clairvoyance also frightened her, it turns out. As if he himself gave her that advice when she was little, helped her cope with being different, and was a leader. He concludes with the words, any power can become evil if you are rude, but if used correctly, it can truly make people happy. Saluria summarizes the advice and tells Tilty that happiness comes when you use your power correctly. And Tilty takes it to heart, asks if it really works that way, then smiles and says she finally understood. She slightly winked, thanked Siluria, and promised she would no longer let her powers scare her. Determined to make everyone happy with her dark magic, she announces that she will immediately start special training. We move into battle while the team fights off plant monsters. Suddenly a strange battle cry about happiness sounds. And Sold rushes straight into the thick of things, bursting out with a loud scream as he swings his blade in a huge arc, hitting every monster in his path. Creatures don't even stand a chance, they scream as the force of his strike tears them to pieces. Rick stepped aside and watched everything, thinking to himself, these Sold skills are just another level. And he decided that since Sold does not know how to use magic, he had to give all his strength to become a master of the sword. I just keep watching, thinking about how much time that guy must have spent training with the sword to become so skilled. But the moment breaks when a winged monster falls from the sky with a deafening scream and catches everyone completely by surprise. Zwig instantly jumps into action, shouts Aqua Lance, and releases a huge wave of water. It hits the monster directly, it howls, is thrown back, and she rushes forward to cover. She shouted to Audrey to come to her aid, and he roared, ready to bring down the hammer. Audrey activates his skill, Stone Hammer, strikes the ground so hard that huge, jagged stone spikes grow from it. Break through the last monsters, finish them off while they give their last pitiful scream. For a moment everything quiets down as the dust and smoke from the magical attacks slowly dissipate. Audrey approaches to check if he is okay, and when he says everything is fine, she notes that it finally seems clear here. But then suddenly he starts groaning and clutching his head, and Sold realizes that something is definitely wrong. Sold and the Knight Panic suddenly seem to bend in half, screaming his name as he falls to the ground. He is given medicine and seated, but he just sits there, full of shame and apologizing for not being able to handle some small magical ailment as the head of the family. Sold stands nearby and asks why you even venture into the demonic realm, hinting that as a leader you shouldn't exhaust yourself like that. He looks down and agrees that it's true, but he cannot come to terms with just sitting and giving orders, hiding safely behind others' backs. He tells Sold directly that he never wanted to be that kind of leader, and Sold looks quite surprised how much this guy carries on himself, especially considering that, well, he grew up watching his father, a man who always went ahead, leading his people with a sword in hand. He was loved not only in the Hartman household, the whole town gathered just to catch a glimpse of him and shout his name. Everyone was drawn to his father's courage, they followed him through anything and shouted for the family to live long. Like with a sad smile admits that he admired that man more than anything, and his only true goal is to grow up and become exactly like him. He worked hard to become such a leader, but everything changed when his parents suddenly died in an accident, and he was left alone with the burden of the family name. Like tells that he eventually became head of the family when he was still very young, and then he tried with all his might to appear strong. But when he faces the truth, he knows he survived only because others saved him. Even the staff of the house supported him, and that it wasn't just them. He admits that even his younger sister Siluria saved him. Now he finally understands. All his life he stood at the end of the line while others stood ahead to protect him. He clenched his fists in complete despair. He says Sold how worthless he felt and that he simply cannot forgive himself for being like that. Like sits on his gear with his head in his hands, looking completely broken, and Soul just stands and watches him. He says that although he was stubborn enough to reach the demonic dimension, because of this magical disease he still turned out to be useless. He begins to believe that he will never become as strong as his father was. And Soul sharply replies, that's not true at all. Others turn around, stunned that he intervened like that. Soul tells him that everyone is weak, especially those like him who can't even use a little magic. He lowers his eyes and admits that he often feels like a useless character without a real purpose, except to be the one who needs to be protected. The soul seems to tell him, believe changes are possible, and shouts for him to master the sword. It all comes down to the heart that believes, just like when Sold's father watched him train in the rain. Sold tightly gripped the blade and looked with confidence. He knew that such determination gave him the strength to move forward. Nearby, Siluria keeps her eyes closed in prayer, and Tilty stands right behind her, watching this moment unfold. As if pondering the word believe, and tells Saul that he finally understands what he is talking about. Sold says that true strength is born from a person's desire and acts only when that person sincerely believes in it, so. He smiles, thank you Saul for the advice, I'll try, and is finally ready to start believing in it. Even someone like him can become strong. He wants to become someone others could be proud of, just like his father once was, and this brings a broad smile to Saul. Just then Zweig and Audrey run back into the group, shouting and asking how everything went for them. Zweig says it as if from here it's just a straight path and she looks quite confident. So, Audrey says that this magical dimension seems quite simple in structure compared to those they have seen. Like begins with enthusiasm to explain to Sold that these underground dimensions are actually just distortions from another world. Usually they look like tiny strange gardens, each one completely different as soon as it appears. Heinz points to a toothy place ahead and says that deeper inside stands a large dome, probably where the core is hiding. But Sold wonders what exactly a core is, so like explains, it is the heart of the entire magical dimension. He says that the whole space is clusters of magical energy, and all this power is given by the core. The core looks different in various places. Sometimes it resembles a plant, sometimes a real magical stone. It can even appear as a magical beast, just a monster with a core inside. Like finishes the lesson by saying that if the core is destroyed, the rift in this world will finally close. Heinz tries to lighten the mood, saying that these simple cores usually aren't such a big deal. So Light urges the group to move and Sold follows behind. But he becomes serious, telling the team not to lower their guard for a second and especially calls out Sold to stay sharp. Sold felt a bad premonition even in the games he played. A high concentration of magic always meant trouble, and the level of this core was simply off the charts. The whole place is a whirl of snow-white energy and jagged fragments swirling around as they dive deeper into the distortion, reaching. Before them stretched a gigantic space, and the group looked like tiny specks against the colossal walls of the rift. Audrey scans the empty space and grimly says that she sees nothing resembling a core anywhere. Like agrees, saying that there are no signs of a magical beast here either, but Sold begins to notice that something is wrong. And his eyes widen as he realizes the danger is coming from another direction, and he shouts to everyone, "Look up." The whole group freezes in place and in complete shock raises their heads. A huge shadow begins to descend above them. And Zweig can't even find words, while Einstein is already saying that with the size of that thing approaching them, they are probably joking. As if falling to the ground, all frightened, and barely pronounces that what stands before him is. The monster was so gigantic that soldiers and knights next to its massive wings and tail looked like tiny bugs. It is a three-eyed black dragon. Its roar shakes everything around. Zweig suddenly realized this is the very same legendary dragon from the stories, and Ains shouts that before them is a real black dragon. As if starting to panic, sweating like crazy and asking how he can even deal with the core, which turns out to be a giant monster. "Thank you very much." But Sold steps forward with his sword ready, as if saying he just needs them to believe in him. The child looks completely focused, as if sworn, no matter what enemy they face, they will definitely win. His voice echoes in the cave as he tells the whole group that they will not lose this battle. Sold straightens his blade and takes the perfect fighting stance, as if ready for anything. And Zweig says the boy is right, and Einstein picks up if the dragon really is the core, then they just need to do it. The black dragon does not retreat, it stands firmly in place and lets out a roar that shakes the entire cave. Someone tries to tell this creature to wait, but it is clearly not in the mood for conversation. It opens its maw wide and simply floods everything around with a huge wave of dark flames. They stood at night, pressed tightly against each other because of the heat. They are completely trapped. The fire is approaching. So, a voice shouted about a water wall to block the explosion, and a huge splash of magic struck the fire. Sold shouted to Zweig, who is now holding a shield and cannot believe how strong these flames are. Zweig feels that her magic is at its limit and tells the boy that she will soon not be able to hold it back. This causes a shout, everyone back. The dragon prepares for another strike. His soul looks irritated. He is tired of waiting, and he is preparing to make his move. He lets out a loud scream as the whole room explodes into chaos of fire and magic. The dragon raised its head in complete shock when a massive blow struck it. It did not see it at all, and beep. Blinding light floods everything, and the blow hits the beast right in the head. Sold suddenly realizes that this is no longer just about Tilty. Finally, he understands the real trick of using his power, so we shout that he does it to protect his friends, and in a flash he releases his water wolf. The knights just go crazy over his magical ice sword, and I still can't believe that boy froze an entire dragon. The monster froze like a statue in a thick layer of ice. For now it is completely immobilized. They just stand and watch, completely captivated, thinking that this guy's power is just insane. He gets stuck in his head, admitting that he was so scared that his body just refused to move. He clenches his fist so hard it trembles. He is ashamed and feels miserable because he was the only one who froze. But Sold loudly shouts that they are not finished yet, holding the defense firmly and preparing for the next round. Sold looks at the massive ice block and asks if the black dragon is still alive, and just then, the monster shatters the ice into a million shards. It towers and lets out a roar that shakes everything around while a scream fills the air, revealing rows of sharp teeth as it wakes up again. The dragon squints an eye and looks at them menacingly, then shakes its head to finally shake off the rest of the frost. Seeing the beast ready to strike, one of the night calls summoned a stone wall. A giant stone barrier slammed into place, holding. The group is still hidden. Audrey says they can stay out of sight for a while, but he speaks as if they have no chance of winning at all. But Soul does not give up. He says they just need to find the dragon's weak spot, and these words completely caught them by surprise. Soul says he knows what he's talking about, recalling what a complete nightmare that monster was in the game world. There is one exact spot on the reverse scale that is exactly what they need to focus on. He explains that weak hits won't even scratch its armor, that's why they could never bring it down before. Sold suddenly remembered, hitting the reverse scale on the dragon's throat is the key, only then can they deal enough damage to. They suddenly realize they really have to finish this and start to worry, how can they get close enough? Getting past those huge tongues of flame will be a real nightmare. The group stays low behind the rocks while Hines turns to Sold and asks if they can really count on him for this. Audrey reminds him that he needs to land one perfect, heavy blow. Right on that weak spot, Zweig promises they will give him all possible support, and Audrey says the knights will be social bait. Sold can get the breakthrough he needs. Sold agrees to the plan, but lowering his gaze to his weapon raises a serious problem. His sword might not hold up, so Zweig offers his, but the blade breaks every time he performs a high-level move. The Sold out knows they really have only one chance. He says he will use it to the fullest, but just as he is about to take a step, he orders to wait. Everyone freezes and looks at him. He stands in the middle of the cave, and the dragon still looms nearby. And as if looking them in the eyes with a serious face, he says he also wants to help in the fight. The knights are simply shocked by Like's request and not believing it, shouted, trying to dissuade him, saying that he should not put himself in such danger, especially because Audrey is horrified at the thought of what might happen if the young master is injured. He says that if something happened to him, it would be the end of everything. But he just clenches his fist so tightly that his hand trembles a little and says he knows exactly what is at stake. He understands the danger but cannot just stand aside when everyone else is fighting. When Sold speaks up and breaks the tension, he says directly, "I believe in you." Simply, they rushed into battle and together as one team throw themselves into the clash with the dragon. The knights watch over his soul, hold their position, and as if finally it spreads into a confident smile, nods with a simple movement and agrees to the plan. Sold smiles in response. Both are ready to give everything they have. The knights become quite touching when you see how the young master takes on the task. They cannot help but feel a little pride, although one of the experienced knights just grumbled to hide his true feelings. He tries not to be distracted from the mission, but then everything goes awry in a second. Someone shouts "careful" to them because Audrey suddenly pushed Sold and seemed to throw him aside because the dragon falls down with a rumble, its giant jaws snapping above everyone. Like suddenly realizes they have been noticed and shouts, "Finally, we've been found," while the knight fusses and takes positions. And one of them begins shouting a water chain spell, and the water swirled around, scattering everywhere. Then he casts a move, a stone castle, and huge boulders explode from the ground. And the water chains tightly wrapped around the dragon's head, preventing its jaws from opening. A heavy stone fell with a dull rumble on its claws, not allowing it to move. The dragon lets out a muffled roar, and the knight, squeezing out his last strength, presses the monster to the ground. And he glances aside and says to Saul, "Make your move immediately." Because he barely holds the dragon down and says he won't be able to maintain this magic for long. Sold shouts in response that he is already taking action, firmly gripping his sword and stepping forward. And rush swiftly at the beast, knowing exactly where to hit the reverse scale. Sold finally notices the reverse scale on the dragon's neck, which glows brightly. He rushed forward, shouting that it was right here, and with one strike threw all his strength. The dragon shuddered violently from the blow, but instead of falling, it breaks into the air, creating a huge shockwave that raises dust and stones in all directions. The knights froze suddenly. One could hardly believe how fast it flashed by, and another soldier instantly panics, seeing his target slip into the sky. He shouts to everyone, "Duck," muttering curses under his breath as he realizes they have lost the advantage. Above, the dragon growls quietly, looking down at the knights who are just standing and swearing. And one of the men admits, now that the beast is out of reach, he feels completely useless. The dragon looks back with a cold, slit-eyed gaze, just waiting for the right moment to finish them off. He grits his teeth, feeling completely helpless because he couldn't do anything to stop the beast, and just as he blames himself, his eyes widen. He instantly notices something that makes him freeze in place. He sees how Sold stands there alone and loses his head, shouting at the guy to run away and save his life, but Sold didn't even flinch. He stands his ground with an impenetrable calm on his face and looks at me as if he has everything under control. The boy says that he actually believes in him, and that's the last thing I wanted to hear right now. As if he stepped back down the stairs, completely stunned by the boy's confidence, and froze in silence. Meanwhile, the dragon hangs right above them, opening its huge maw, and dazzling light begins to gather in its throat. It releases a colossal burst of energy that hits the ground with such force that it scatters everything in sight. And a huge cloud of dust and smoke rises, completely hiding the ground while the dragon watches from above. The beast peers through the haze, baring its teeth, and waits to see if anyone survived that blow. Soul falls from the sky like a real meteor and aimed his blade straight at the dragon. He watches with all his heart and even throat, shouting that he counts on the boy to finish this. They make the final joint push. The pressure builds as Sold takes aim. Sold shouted in response that he's already on it. His face shows he won't back down for a second. He swings with all his might and delivers a powerful strike that cuts the monster through. The dragon doesn't even manage to react. The force of the blow instantly shatters it completely. The giant creature finally falls to the ground, raising a cloud of dust and smoke. The fight is over. The knights nearby simply burst with joy, shouting that they really won and that the team play was on another level. Soul laughed a little, as if saying that the victory was his because he held everything together. They won't tell the boy that he is the real reason why they are all still standing. Like Stance, they looked down, admitting that he wanted to be brave, but before that dragon, his legs just froze. But when he saw Saul rushing into battle without any doubt, he felt the courage he needed. He tells the boy that seeing him stand without fear before such a monster was exactly that. He is the hero he always looked up to, and when he thanks him, he just blushes from all the praise. The knights laugh. A broken sword is a trifle compared to killing a dragon, and someone even offers their own sword, saying, "The monster is finally defeated forever," so they set off. Gold stops, looking back as if a chill ran down his spine. He is right. The dragon's eyes suddenly open, and he looks again. Dark energy pulses through his scales. He looks much worse than before. Sold loses his head, wondering how it still moves if he aimed right at its weak spot. Sold realizes with horror that he has completely underestimated the black dragon. He understands it can't get any worse, so as the fire creeps closer, a million thoughts start spinning wildly in his head. Like the others, he can only watch and scream. But the soul doesn't even have time to think. His body just moves on its own, and at that moment, the dragon breathes out such a huge wave of fire that it should destroy everyone immediately. The ice claws seem to pull him down, and Audrey watches as the flames engulf them, but somehow, as if shouting, "Sold," thinking that the child could not have survived such a direct hit. From the height of the dragon's breath, it looks like it swallows the whole area, but a small bubble stubbornly holds on. Even the dragon looks puzzled when the fire starts to swirl and break away from the target, leaving. The knight froze in shock. Audrey asks what is going on at all because she notices that the fire seems to pull to the right. All this is directed straight to one point. All that heat and energy begin to flow into Sold as if he is a human vacuum cleaner. Like stares in the very center of the explosion, he cannot believe his eyes and exclaims because Sold stands in the middle of this heat as if in hell itself. He understands this is like his fight with Fenrir. The dragon clearly uses demonic power, so he tightly grips his sword, and at that moment a sudden spark flashes in his head, the idea of a completely new technique. And he starts laughing like a madman, shouting that this is the best feeling in the world, while dark energy swirls around his body. As if the name scream Sold was heard, and the knights just stood in complete shock. Audrey can't even comprehend it. He asks if this guy really just absorbed all those flames. And then Sold suddenly realizes he literally turned the flames into a new blade. Sold sincerely thanks the black dragon, telling the beast that thanks to this attack he was able to. He changes and becomes even stronger. With those marks on his face, he seems like a completely different person, standing there with a huge smile. The dragon roars in helplessness and rage, while Soul remains ice-cold calm. He is ready. Like and his knights are completely stunned by what they see, like cannot understand what insane power Sold really hides, because no one should be able to turn dragon's breath into a sword like that. Soul just calmly looked. Now he is fully focused and ready to show everyone what his god demon style is really capable of. Sold stands there with dark marks on his face, feeling the power, and says that he is finally beginning to understand how to summon this new ability. He explains that at first he must take a special stance and then intercept the enemy's attack straight in the forehead, but as soon as he thinks about it, he realizes just withstanding the blow is not enough. There is a deeper, inner side to it. Because he knows he must have the fire within to protect himself and everyone he loves, he does not retreat as if. The dragon roars and releases another colossal explosion of energy aimed directly at him. The entire area is torn apart by a giant explosion. A blinding flash rises. As if completely losing control, he shouts the name of the soul aloud, thinking the child has just been vaporized. But the soul is still focused and he understands there is something else hidden in this power, as if a god demon lives deep within his body. He calls the technique Ice Wolf Flash, explaining that the sword now has a blade of ice that freezes everything it touches. As if the sword itself carries the ice, but it is his body that preserves the instinct that truly hunts the prey. Sold feels a new power awakening, wonders what really hides in his sword, and as if wolf-like speed spreads through his body. His eyes sharpen, he is ready to swiftly descend from the sky and strike. He realizes that now he holds in his hands the very flaming blade of the black dragon. He rushed forward, shouting, "Dragon of Fortune, fire wings of the black dragon." He lets out a deafening scream, and his body transforms into a streak of flame like a dragon, madly rushing through the sky and leaving a trail behind. The dragon sees it approaching, but is too slow to react in time, so Sold shouts at the beast, ordering it to eat its own flame. He bursts into the dragon's neck with all the strength he has. The giant pillar of fire exploded upward, throwing the dragon's head back and completely smashing everything around. As if at night everyone just loses their heads from excitement, shouting at the top of their lungs because the soul blade completely broke off near the hilt. He really put everything he had into that last strike. Leaving him standing amid clouds of smoke, he clenched his fist and celebrated the great victory. The black dragon, which was the core of this entire demonic dimension, finally begins to burn away into nothing, and when dust settled and the whole group stood, catching their breath, Sold glanced at Like with a huge smile, while Like just stood there, completely stunned by the child's power. When the dragon disappears, it leaves behind a huge magical stone that glows brightly right in front of them. Audrey looks and asks, "Well, what is something so huge even worth?" And Ein just smiles. It could easily be sold for at least $1 billion. Sold the stairs near the great magical stone and realized that with such a find, he can really do it. He knows that he will finally be able to craft the sword he has long planned. Sold imagines how Tilty will shine with happiness because of the gift and tells her to just wait. Meanwhile, in the Hartman estate, the gaze shifts to Tilty, who is now crying with all her might, barely holding back the sound of pain that wants to burst out as she tries to tame a huge whirlpool of dark energy. Siluria loudly encourages her, and Tilty just mumbles. She puts every tiny bit of control she has into it. Siluria says she is almost done, but then Tilty finally reaches her limit and gasps for air. Watching as the dark power she tried to shape simply crumbles into a pile of tiny fragments. She falls to her knees, breathing heavily and hating that she failed again, so Siluria tries to convince her to rest a little. She trains endlessly, but Tilty only raises her eyes and says she will not stop. Her older brother works tirelessly, and she needs to keep up with him. Siluria tells Tilty that she is too stubborn in training. Tilty just laughs and says she is sorry that she is like that, but then a powerful explosion shook the entire building. Siluria screamed as the walls trembled and dust fell everywhere. Siluria points to the window and says the noise came from outside, and Tilty just wonders what is even happening here. Down in the garden, a huge cloud of smoke and debris covers the entrance where the gate once stood. You see Hartman's knights scattered on the ground, barely groaning, lying in the dirt. Commander Ani, in complete shock, looks at the smoke and says it's impossible the one standing there should be dead. It turns out to be Dogra. He seems like a real monster, walking through fire, and his hand burns from the heat. On his face is a terrifying smile. He surveys the estate and asks where his target is hiding. Dag will call someone a damn brat and say that this time he will definitely kill them. He stretches out his burnt hand to grab another guard, flaunting a strange bracelet covered with eyes. Brother Tilty stands in the wasteland, looking at the frozen body of Dogger and whispers to him, "Time to wake up." He says, "I will give him a dog or his face will remain locked behind a silent screen of ice." He stretches out his hand. He says he uses the power of darkness to fight her, and then the eerie bracelet covered with eyes clings to the puppy's wrist. Dagoa groans, falling to the ground, and Brother Tilty mockingly asks if he has finally returned among the living. Raising his eyes to his savior, Daga acknowledges him as his master while being told this is his last chance. With coldness in his gaze, Brother Tilty gives the final order, go and kill that brat. Dagura feels the power simply pouring through his body, and this makes his master understand, even words are unnecessary. Because he lets out a powerful roar, shouting that this time he will definitely kill him. He stands right under the Hartman mansion and shouts loudly, Saldo, come out, because he knows the boy is hiding inside. Dagura raises his hand, dark energy shoots out, the bracelet with an eye on his wrist glows with power. His face is twisted with rage, and he screams that he will destroy everything in his path. The earth begins to crack under pressure. Siluria looks frightened and Tilty shouts at him to stop. Siluria tries to explain to him that her brother is not here, but Tilty steps forward and firmly says she will not let anyone harm Hartman. Dagoa just chuckles with a creepy smile, calls Tilty the priestess of darkness, and says he has long waited to see her. He leans closer, mockingly asking her once again to show him that dark power of hers. Tilty asks Siluria to stay behind and apologized for the mess, but the younger girl just smiled and said, don't apologize. Siluria explains, even if her vision led her to the mansion as if by the command of some destined fate. Now everything is completely different. Her seriousness has completely unsettled Tilty. Looking Tilty straight in the eyes, Siluria promises to protect her, because from now on she chooses her own fate. Tilty looks at the girl and says, Siluria, because she sees new determination in her. And on the other side of the broken land, Dagura just chuckles at the very thought that she would have to protect someone. He can't stand it and shouts for them to shut up, swinging his hand to strike. Tilty reacts lightning fast and summons her air wall, enveloping both of them in a swirling shield of wind. She doesn't just deflect, she sends a huge air vortex back, and it crashes with a roar right into Dagura. Dog's face twisted with rage, and he barked at the brat not to underestimate him. He unleashes a massive burst of energy from himself, completely destroying the area and making Siluria scream. Tilty ends up face down in the dirt, groaning in pain, while Siluria calls her in panic. But Dagura is already here, reaching out through the smoke and, as if nothing happened, grabs Siluria by the collar. He leans in with a sinister smile and tells the priestess that it's finally time to give up all that dark power. Dagura firmly holds Tilty and shouts at her to finally give up that highest power. But Siluria screams, begging her to stop, and Dagura growls that he will kill each of them if he doesn't get his way. He just stands and laughs as a huge wave of dark energy begins to surge around. He completely loses his mind, drooling and obsessed with the feeling that the power of darkness has finally manifested. Siluria is trapped right in the middle of the surge, screaming Tilty's name from the very center of the chaos. Tilty looks back and sees a vision of her mother, who gently whispers that everything will be fine. This gives Tilty the push she so desperately needs, and even with tears in her eyes, she tells herself she will manage. Siluria raised her eyes in complete shock, froze, and just stares at Tilty as the atmosphere around begins to change. Tilty stands firm and says she is no longer afraid of the dark now, she will be the one to control it. Dark energy responds to her, bursting from the ground in huge, sharp waves around Siluria. Tilty is completely stunned, voices of pain and sorrow flood her mind, and she feels as if she can no longer endure, finally lets out a loud scream, clutching her head amid the dark wave. Siluria rushes to her, calling her by name, while Tilty falls to her knees, barely holding herself together. Although it feels as if everything in her head is literally falling apart, she still finds the strength to tell Siluria that she is okay. It turns out this dark force directly responds to all the bad things Tilty is feeling right now. She understands if she ever wants to truly master this energy, she will have to win the battle against her own emotion. She is truly afraid that all the sorrow and suffering she has had to endure might prove too heavy to overcome. But even when Dagura holds her captive, she reaches into the darkness and begs it for a favor. Tears ran down her face, she pleaded with this power not to turn into something that only brings more pain. Instead, she prays that it will turn into a power that can truly bring happiness to everyone. Dagura looks completely frightened and asks, what is even happening here right now? Darkness, like a giant wave, gathers around them, and he still holds onto Tilty. Suddenly, massive shadowy hands emerge from the ground and abruptly grab Dagura. And he begins to lose control, shouting that something grabbed his hand while the shadows wrap around him. Tilty stands her ground and shouts into the darkness to listen to her. And then she simply released all her power. A burst of energy hit the dog or his back and he screamed. Siluria just sits on the ground, completely stunned by what she sees, but a small smile appears on her face, and she whispers that Tilty finally managed it. Watching Tilty stand unwavering before the dark power, Siluria suddenly realizes she is actually the one controlling the darkness. And Tilty folds her hands together with a focused gaze and says that she is much stronger than all this sorrow. The shadow completely grabs Doguru. He begins to go insane and screams for it to let him go. Tilty does not retreat. She calls the darkness to catch him, putting everything she has into the spell. Looking at everything through a magical crystal ball, the mysterious stranger finds this spectacle quite impressive. The masked man stands and firmly says that this is definitely the true power of the Dark Priestess. But he knows there is much more to it. He thinks that the abyss of darkness is still too deep to understand. He just watches and utters Tilty's name, as if expecting something else to happen. Returning to the fight, Dogra screams in pain. The shadow squeezes him, and Tilty only tells him, "Give up already." Siluria stands aside with a wide smile. She was glowing with admiration at how incredible Tilty turns out to be. Dogger's face twisted into a wild scream as the power of darkness began to completely consume him. He barely makes a sound, only his hand sticks out while the shadows engulf him. A creepy hand covered with eyes reaches out from the darkness and grabs everything that is left. Suddenly, a massive burst of energy swept through the area and pushed Tilty back. She stumbled and screamed. Siluria tries to cover her eyes, says the darkness is too strong, and she can't believe they were blown away. Tilty sits on the ground, doing nothing but trying to understand what the hell just happened. They both looked up at the sky and saw high above them a small winged silhouette hovering, leaving. This demonic monster with wings and too many eyes is just hovering there with a disgusting smile. The monster glanced down at Tilty, called her a troublemaker, and directly said it would kill her. Siluria froze in shock looking at the monster and barely uttered that it really flies. But Tilty looks even more worried, whispers dog or his name, and realizes that it is not him at all. She stares intently at the monster hovering above them and says, obviously what they are looking at is not human. The monster just smiles and tells her to die, extending a huge clawed hand. While Siluria screams with all her might for Tilty to just get away. Tilty's eyes instantly widened. She realized she wouldn't have time to move. Suddenly Sold burst onto the scene, shouting for him to stop. They both hit the ground hard as a gigantic explosion of dust and light cleared everything around. When Siluria looked up at them with a huge smile, she felt such relief help had finally arrived. Tilty also looked at them, her face lit up because now the guys stood between her and that thing. Siluria shouted to her older brothers Sold and Rake, asking if they were even okay. Finally, the portal to the demon world closed forever, and the group headed back to the city. One of the knights suddenly shouted something in front of the carriage while Sold and Lake sat in the back. The closer they got to the city, the clearer it was to see smoke rising from the mansion. Everyone is gathering behind the walls to come up with a plan. Elsia says that he and Mike decided to break ahead and fly in front of everyone thanks to Mike's wind magic. As soon as they appeared, Sold asks how Dogra came back from the dead, and Lake, looking at the vile monster, wonders what kind of creature it is. Siluria grabbed her brother and told him that Dogora was wearing a very creepy bracelet. She says that immediately after that thing started glowing strangely, Dogra completely turned into that monster. Sold suddenly realized that this item was in the game and wondered, is it really cursed? Turns out this is a cursed tool that can really turn a person into a demon. The whole group was caught off guard when a hoarse voice laughed and called the kid who finally appeared a brat. The monster stands in the dust and tirelessly repeats that it will kill Sold again and again. Doggo let out a scream as if wishing death to all, and fired a huge wave of dark energy. Nick shouts at them to dodge, and Sold grabs Siluria and pushes her aside. And the monster just stands and watches the destruction, and its power illuminates the entire area. Everyone freezes and looks at the huge cloud of dust where the explosion hit, and then the force of the explosion destroys everything around. Fragments scatter in all directions. It's hard to believe what's happening with his manner, and Tilty says she just can't recover from that magical power emanating from him. Siluria calls her brother and Sold clenches his fist. He just stands and greedily dreams that he had a sword to somehow fight back. Suddenly someone stretches out a hand and says, Sold, take the sword you have in your hands, and this stuns everyone. Everyone shouts Eins, and he stands, covered in blood, barely holding on and begging Like and Siluria to forgive him. Like and Sold shout his name one last time. At that very moment the old man loses his last strength and falls right here. Sold grips the sword hilt and thanks himself. If only he had just finished it, everything would have been different. He shouts for everyone to focus on the wounded, but Siluria just freezes in shock and looks at Sold in shock as he steps forward. Sold says he will take this fight upon himself, and Siluria just watches as her older brother walks toward the monster. Deluria tries to stay calm and tells Tilty that everything will be fine and that it will end soon. Soul tells Dagari that he will now show him what it's all about, and meanwhile his blade begins to heat up and glow with burning heat. He releases the flame of the legendary black dragon with the sword. He draws a giant arc of fire in the air. Tilty freezes at the flaming sword, not believing her eyes as she's seeing some new deadly move for the first time. The monster loses its head and screams about the sword, clearly feeling the pressure of the colossal heat approaching it. A dog or someone rushes into attack, shouting for the soul to perish, but the boy simply lets out a roar and throws himself straight back at him. They collided, a powerful explosion of fire and dark energy tore the air between them. The monster's claw collided with the power of Soul, and a sharp, piercing flash exploded. A huge wave of energy burst outward and instantly completely filled the yard. Force throws Dagger back. He lets out a furious roar and loses footing. As if in Saluria, they look in complete disbelief, while Tilty begins to jump and shout joyfully, completely delighted by. My Soul just stands there calmly watching the smoke disperse, even though his blade is broken. At the impact site remained a huge crater. It shows everyone what incredible power this child possesses. Just used, but suddenly a creepy laugh sounded from the smoke. Soul turns around and Saluria asks, "What is happening here?" All this happens and Dagara slowly begins to get up, looking like a real nightmare. The old man is now sweating and seems to shout that it cannot be that Dogra is still alive. The monster simply opens its jaws and releases its dark final attack to finish everything. Agura spreads his arms wide, and dark energy begins to roll through his entire body. This makes Soul ask what he is even doing, as if in Saluria stared during total shock, not believing his eyes. The light from the monster's face becomes so bright that it blinds, and that's it. The entire area is engulfed by a colossal burst of energy, and everyone below just watches. As if they shouted that this is a self-destruction move, and the souls named Saluria scream like. People in the town panic, pointing at the sky and unable to understand what this light is. A giant sphere of destructive power looms over the city. Its center hangs right above the heart of the state. This drives the residents crazy because the attack falls directly on the mansion. While Soul stands there feeling the insane pressure of magic, he realizes with horror that he has no. A sword is needed to stop this order. Saluria to evacuate everyone around while they scramble for rescue. Soul's heart sank when he realized he wouldn't make it in time. Just when he was ready to lose hope, a girl appears before him. Everything is a bit crooked and she decisively says to her older brother, "Leave this to me." While Soul stands, they seem frozen, stunned, calling her name because she. Screaming, she asks him to just believe her and lets out a scream. All this crazy dark energy, Soul cannot believe that she actually. Controlling it, she asked herself if she finally found the power that does not lose to darkness. She holds back immense power above the house, but she grumbles, feeling as if this power could blow her away. And everything around begins to rumble and shake from the pressure. Tilty puts all her strength into the final assault, screams so that the dark energy blows the enemy away to the last crumb. Unlock activates, locking the area in a huge vortex. The monster is completely caught off guard. It makes a strange sound as the swirling air begins to tear apart its attack. It is in complete shock and desperately screams, "What the hell is happening to me right now?" Deluria raised her head, eyes wide open. She cannot believe how much wind magic suddenly filled the sky. Like Tilty calls and Soul shouts to friends that the time has come to stand her up against all they have. Deluria stands next to them and loudly shouts that they all together, like one team, will protect everyone. As if breaking free from the chain, they shout that they will save the Hartman family and the whole town from destruction. The monster groans in pain while the wind pressure begins to squeeze its hand, and it growls, calling them a bunch of damn brats. Tilty clenches her jaw and tells herself that she will not lose, thinking only about finally making everyone happy. The monster begins to crumble as wind magic tears its body apart, and it can only squeeze out. A few last sounds still echo, and the giant whirlpool completely engulfs this area. The pressure is incredibly great. The massive hand of the monster is simply torn off. The three stand together, directing the last flashes of magic. When the dust settles, someone seems to sigh loudly with relief and says that they really did it. That Saluria joyfully agrees with them as they all stand in front of the house and loudly celebrate their great victory. Tilty is so overwhelmed with emotions that she runs straight to Soul, shouting that she did it, and calls him her older brother. He is just standing there with an empty expression on his face, completely stunned. And Tilty understands that she just blurted out, repeats those words, and looks completely embarrassed. Soul quickly covered the awkward moment. He grabbed her in a big hug and said she was incredible. Sold is now just confused and depressed by everything that is happening. Tilty happily giggles and hugs him tightly, but he can't. You can't get that magic she just used out of your head. It's a terrible power that can engulf and erase any darkness it touches. And that's why she is the strongest villain in the gaming world. She stands there with that dark aura. It's clear she draws power born from pure despair. Sold tightly pressed her to himself and promised himself he would never let such power fall into the hands of an evil person. We move on as if they surveyed the surroundings and say that since the mansion was evacuated, no one was really hurt, so it's sold. He speaks as if he is truly glad to hear that everyone is safe. Thoughts about the attack overwhelmed him, and he asks if Dagiru was sent there by Valgar's order. But he doesn't think so. He says Valgar may be a fool, but not so much as to be that pushy because, in fact, his goal is ultimately to take control of the entire city. Looks very worried, explaining that if the townspeople find out that Valgar killed them, he will be completely condemned. He thinks there is a 90% chance that it was just a dog aura that caused its own crazy massacre. He remembers how that dog aura looked like a real monster obsessed with murder. Sold intervened. He is almost sure that it was that cursed instrument that Saluria mentioned that was actually the culprit of all this rampage. Frey and Saluria stand and watches in complete shock, repeats cursed instrument as if he does not believe those words. Sold adds that it is a cursed thing, whoever wears it gains some kind of crazy demonic power. He begins to recall his gaming knowledge. It is a rare item, usually found only in the magic dimension, which means it is a rare item, 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 which means it is a rare item. Which means it is a rare item, 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 which means it is a rare item. Which means it is a rare item, which means it is a rare item, which means it is a rare item, which means it is a rare item. Thank you very much for your time. See you in the next video. It reminds him of an old document he once read. He says it said, "A person gains that power at the cost of being devoured by evil." Frey agrees with him. She says she noticed the dogger bracelet was too creepy and just overflowed with magic. The group stands together amid the ruins, and meanwhile someone wonders who would even give such a thing to someone like Dogger. Sold realizes, if it wasn't Valgar, then it must be a group known as the Titans, a dark organization that quietly operates behind the scenes. Sold pondered the Titans and began to guess whether their main goal all this time was to capture Tilty. His thought lies like a heavy stone in his chest, especially when he realizes that Dagora could actually have killed each of them. He admits that it is true, but still cannot comprehend what the Titans really want in the end. And just when everything finally quiets down, Saluria suddenly says that she is completely fine, and this catches everyone by surprise. An extremely determined expression flashed across her face, and she shouted that she will not lose to guys like the Titans. She is also ready to fight. Soul just looks at her, but his thoughts instantly fly to Tilty and the danger she found herself in. Someone bursts in and says that their power is real, and watching it was truly incredible. Frey laughs and says they did well. They trained for a whole 3 days, and Sold is completely shocked because he thought only 1 day had passed. He says they were supposed to stay in that demonic dimension for only 24 hours, but explains that time flows completely differently there. Something clicked in Sold when he recalled his gaming knowledge. 1 day in that dimension always equals 3 days in the real world. He looks very energized, really, and says that with Sold and Tilty together, their team is now almost invincible. Sold looks at Tilty and thinks that her power is actually the strongest in the world. Here it is the legendary power of the main villain of the game, which is mostly called the power of despair. He grabs her by the shoulders and begins to think about the dark fate of the ruins that awaits her, while Saluria just marvels. Why is her brother behaving so strangely? She moaned, completely stunned by the thought of her fate. And Tilty immediately notices this and, worried, asks if he is okay because he suddenly looks as if he has seen a ghost. Sold tries to appear calm and says he is fine, but Saluria feels something is definitely wrong. Everything begins to blur before his eyes. At that moment it dawns on him, his head just no longer works properly. Tilty looks at him with wide-open eyes, completely frightened for him. Like in Saluria, both lose their heads, screaming in shock as they see him start to lean over. Sold's legs give way, he falls heavily to the ground, and the 3 around rush to help. Saluria stands completely frozen and watches as everything happens right before her. While starts to scream, and Tilty seems about to lose control both. Darting into the very center of the courtyard, Saluria and I shout his name in unison as we run to him. Later that night, everything finally quieted down at the estate. When Bobo explains that it is simply a clear case of Mana's exhaustion, she says that she probably just fainted from overusing magic, and she really did faint. He asks them to calm down a little, good rest, and he will be fine. Which leaves Tilty-like and Saluria standing by his bed, guarding him while he sleeps. Like says how strange it is that Sold even has mono exhaustion, since he supposedly shouldn't be able to use magic. So, that crazy sword technique must be the reason. Honestly, it's a real mystery how that guy squeezes so much power leaving. Saluria just stood over him, looking down and quietly calling her older brother. Sold unconscious with a towel on his head, and it turns out he fell simply because that god demon style turned out to be too exhausting. The guy only found out what happened to him much later. And just as he was lying there, knights burst into the room, shouting about the young master, and the princess Soul was already so detached from reality that he didn't even know. He is lying on the floor. Zvegan, Audrey, and Rash run in, panicking because they heard what happened and want to know if he is really okay. So he steps forward, calms everyone down, and says that Soul just needs a good rest and he will soon be back on his feet. The guards felt great relief. Zveg is just happy that he is safe, and Audrey asks everyone to pray for his speedy recovery. And then Zveg suddenly changes tone and says that they actually managed to get back that thing he asked for, and Mike simply showed her a cool thumbs up and smiled as if he had everything under control. Hilty stands with her jaw dropped, trying to piece together what they actually found. Until she saw Zweig lifting a huge shining crystal. She asks if it is a magic stone, and he replies to her, exactly. Adrian's wigs boast about the loot and excitedly tell how they managed to obtain the magic stone after the black dragon fell. And it turns out this thing is a real jackpot, at least $1 billion. Soul-like decides to spend this money on repairing the city. The stone officially belongs to him. Hilty just stands stunned and speechless, trying to comprehend the scale of it all. Until she finally comes to her senses and says it as if she has a real request. The knights are completely frozen by her sudden seriousness, and Zweig looks especially surprised. Even can only blink confusedly, wondering what T might ask for now. Hilty just looks ahead, pure determination in her eyes. We move on. The rest of the city is immersed in silence under the starry night sky. But in Frey's forge, he still does not sleep and incessantly strikes the anvil with a hammer. Frey freezes, lifts his glasses, and looks surprised who could have appeared in the forge so late. She opens the door and sees Tilty with a cart. He stands and asks the girl what could have gone wrong. Hilty just smiles and reminds her of the promise they made, and Lake stands right behind, proud of himself. Frey's jaw drops and she looks completely stunned by what is being shown to her. It turns out they brought that huge magical stone right into her shop, and she simply cannot believe her eyes. Hilty shines with excitement. She finally reached the Frey's place with the goods. Frey begins to sweat. She realizes that Tilty really brought all the magical stones they found, and this. And Tilty falls into a deep bow, begging Frey to use these stones to forge a special sword for her older brother. She suddenly becomes serious and explains that ordinary blades just break. They cannot keep up with his insane skill. And even when his equipment fails, he fights with all his might to protect everyone. Hilty, bowed down, pours out her soul and says that he will continue until he falls. But she knows if he really had a magical stone sword, he could finally fight without holding back. She understands that asking for this is asking for something insanely expensive, but still begs Frey again and again. While the rest of the crew is frozen and just looking at her, give everything she has to help her brother. Deluria sadly says that the Tilty mansion is still half ruined, and they need a lot of money to repair it. But suddenly he gets that look in his eyes and he says, after all, everything is just a matter of money. Hines and Audrey also intervened, reminding everyone that the mercenary saved a bunch of lives and that counts. And Saluria adds, without a doubt in the future he will save many more people. Hilty starts crying because he realizes such value can never be bought with money, and like that. He returns to the smithy with a wide smile and tells her, boldly use all the magical stones they brought. Soul truly deserves it. He showed everyone that he is worth the effort. And so, thanks to Tilty's sincere desire and Rake's smart plan, finally everything starts moving. Rake manages to place a huge magical stone into Frey's hands, and while Kovalka carefully examines it, saying that the magic inside is insane and this work will be a real challenge. Tilty looks her in the eyes and begs, use that power to create a sword. The participants of the clash look at her, thinking about how Tilty looked so miserable when they first met compared to them. That stern expression on her face is all because she is fighting for her older brother. She gently stroked Tilty's head and said, trust me, promising to forge a sword the world has never seen. She adds that Tilty must tell Saldo, stop living life in a dream. Tilty simply smiles widely at her and says, "Thank you for everything." Looking back, it is clear Tilty became much stronger while no one was paying attention. And already the next morning, the whole city gathered in the square. Everyone wanted to hear what had happened. Like stands on the stage together with Saluria and tells everyone that yesterday the villain Dogora attacked them, but now they can finally breathe peacefully. He shouts at the top of his lungs that he killed Dogora so that every person in the crowd would hear this news. People simply go crazy. They start shouting joyfully and praying with relief because the villain has finally disappeared forever. They constantly chant Like and Saluria, celebrating the victory as if it were the best thing that ever happened to the city. Everyone shouts that Like is a hero and wishes long life to the Hartman family, while Saluria just stands and absorbs it all. But he turns his back to the crowd and says he didn't do it alone because the person who really saved them. He was the one who stood up when Dogora attacked and everything seemed completely hopeless. He explains that before the attack, a furious demonic dimension opened, and they even had to deal with a legendary dragon. Like doesn't let the story die down, telling the crowd about the brutal life-and-death clash with the Black Dragon. He even honestly admits to them that at that moment his legs simply froze with fear. And then he tells everyone that right beside him was a friend who helped him find the courage to finally take a step forward. And he tells about a boy smaller than him who didn't know any spells but still believed in his path. Explaining how the boy grabbed a sword and worked until he became strong. He never let difficulties stop him because he is the true hero who really saved the city. He is shown to the whole crowd and loudly shouted, "Thank you very much." He loudly shouts his name, introducing the son of the Ranger family, Souled Ranger. He raises his fist and calls everyone, "Let's applaud the one who risked his life and is now resting." The whole town goes crazy. People chant for the soul of Lord and call him the hero of the town. They never got tired of cheering for the Ranger family, and Sold suddenly realized this speech just turned him into a legend. In the mountains at home, Gallant simply works in the field like on an ordinary day, completely unaware that his reputation is exploding, and his wife Mero calls him to take a break. Returning to the ceremony, he does not let the wave die down and loudly tells the crowd that Sold is not the only hero worth celebrating, and does everything so that everyone knows. Sold's sister stood beside him and fought together with him. He brings Tilty out before the whole town and shouts for everyone to give her an ovation, and at that moment the spotlight falls on Tilty and the crowd begins to go wild. The entire crowd erupted with cries, "Long live Lady Tilty and the Rangers," clearly showing that they have become the biggest stars of the town. Tilty only smiles slightly, realizing that it was all part of Like's plan to win the town over to their side, so now it is much harder for enemies to pick on her. The name of the Hartman family shines like never before. The reputation of all these corrupt nobles is completely destroyed, and the crowd's enthusiasm only worsens their affairs. Valgar Debbie Hip is back home. He is going crazy, clutching his head and cursing the Hartmans and Rangers to hell for destroying everything. He trembles with rage, stubbornly repeating to himself that only his family truly deserves to rule the town, but reality is already starting to sink in. He cannot believe that the townspeople have turned away from him and praised some riffraff. The more he thinks about it, the less he understands why it all turned out this way. His face is almost purple with rage. He is boiling, blaming Doguru entirely for rebelling and starting to act on his own. Walger experiences a complete breakdown, grabbing his hair, sweating like mad, and not understanding why he is being accused, as he is sure he did nothing wrong. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his whining and directly stated that all this mess was his fault, and at that moment, a mysterious figure in a fur cloak entered the room. The guest reminds Walger that he has already been warned. This is his last chance, and the nobleman only lets out a frightened squeak, raising his eyes. Brother Tilty stands there, incredibly formidable, and grimly says that Walger still failed to capture the Dark Priestess, so the nobleman now begs for mercy from his lord. He looks at Walger with cold, piercing eyes and tells him that he is completely worthless. That is why he had to come personally and deal with this, because Walger could not handle it himself. Walger remains on his knees, desperately trying to shift the blame, shouting that it is not his fault and that the Hartman family ruined everything. Brother Tilty quietly, ominously laughed, coldly said, "Very well," and, as if preparing for the next step, turned away from the nobleman, who shrank in fear. Something suddenly caught Tilty at the Hartman estate, and her brother simply said that the Dark Priestess would watch over the affairs for some time. Standing on the balcony in a mask, he says that the darkness is only spreading, and it feeds on the emotions of everyone involved. The narrator notes that during all that chaos with Dagura, the power of Saluria actually significantly increased. And this will only intensify with each step she takes as she moves forward. At the Valgur estate, he is completely confused and asks how the master drove the Dogru insane, while Brother Tilty only asks him to calm down because he has one specific question. He asks Walger if he still wants to be the one who rules this city. Walger does not even hesitate and says, yes, so. The masked man offers to give him the power to rule over everything, speaks of the power of darkness, and this only confuses Valgur even more. But Brother Tilty smiles and says he will use Valgur's own greed to make it happen. He extends his hand to the aristocrat. And as he continues to talk about this dark power, Valgur begins to panic and shouts loudly, calling for his master. This eerie mass of dark energy and eyes begins to engulf everything around, while a voice tells him that he must make this power grow, leading to a terrible scream that echoed through the mansion walls. Standing by the window, Brother Tilty sees the soul of the young swordsman is actually the key to its development. Brother Tilty gazed into the distance, thinking about that sword ranger and how the power from his magical sword seems too much like darkness. He says they will soon learn the truth, chuckling to himself in anticipation of what will happen in the next experiment. Returning home, Soul collapsed into bed and passed out. He says that when he finally woke up, he didn't even notice that a new trouble had already begun. He is just lying with his eyes closed, remembering how he had no idea what would happen next. The forge is still lit late at night, and the sound of a hammer striking metal echoes in the air. Inside, Frey puts all her strength into the work and grumbles about how stubborn this magical stone is, but she does not give up. She raises the hammer high and challenges the stone come on, because she will forge it anyway, and with in her eyes is a mad determination. She swears to turn this into the greatest sword ever forged. While Sold sleeps peacefully, Frey's voice rings out with a promise, just wait and see what she is planning. 3 days have passed since they overthrew Dogger, and Tilty and Saluria stand there, gloomy and very serious. In the room, Saluria looked at the bed and said anxiously that her older brother is not waking up at all. She smiles tensely, trying to stay positive, and reassures Tilty that Sold will definitely get better soon, and Tilty can only agree. Sold says that during all this, he was still sound asleep. He had no idea that at that very moment, a completely new threat was already sneaking up on them. Zweig bursts into the room, shouting that the young master is calling both of them right now. Saluria asks what happened to her brother, but Zweig just shouts that they have appeared again. See you next time. Outside, the city is complete chaos. People are fleeing to save themselves because fires are breaking out everywhere. The city's residents scream and horror monsters have appeared, and there are too many of them to handle. Old legends say people corrupted by cursed things turn into what is called magic. Like tells the girls, there is a report about a margin that looks exactly like a dog and is currently terrorizing the city. In the office, the knight says that someone is using cursed tools again, and instantly sprang into action, shouting that the strongest forces of the Hartman family will not let the harm spread further. He looked at the team and asked Audrey, Zweig, and Silria if he could count on them, and everyone quickly agreed to the plan. Everything moves insanely fast, and as if turning to Tilty and saying that he also needs to borrow her power for this fight. Tilty simply shines with joy that she can help and says to Reich, I'm definitely in the game. Light throws the last words, he and I will take this chaos upon ourselves from the estate while the team moves out. Smoke and flames begin to engulf the city, the attack grows stronger. Locals start to panic, and the knights do their best to get everyone out of the danger zone safely. Suddenly, 3 mages appeared in the middle of the street and began destroying everything in sight. Imagined creatures roamed the streets with one goal, laughing and repeatedly executing their plan to destroy everything. And the main monster moves right up to the camera lens, its gaze obsessed as if it wants to destroy the entire city. Hartman's knights waste no time, immediately unleashing a water spear and a combo with a stone axe on the beast. Pushing the creature back into the air, it crashes onto its back in the middle of the stone street. That evening they gather again. One says how terrifying this demon is, but the partner just shrugs and says these guys are total weaklings compared to the black dragon they faced earlier. They thought the fight was over, but suddenly the monster's clawed paw trembled on the ground. One of the knights barely manages to react. The creature directs a powerful energy blast at him. The attack hits the buildings behind them, a huge explosion, and wooden debris and glass scatter everywhere. Nighttime chaos in search of shelter. They can't believe their eyes, and one of them says this must be some kind of joke because the monster rises again and still goes towards them, even though its head has completely flown off. The monster does not want to remain fallen, and Siluria understands that this creature is as stubborn as that demon dog or was, so it's time to say goodbye. She steps forward and releases her magic, shouting Air Castle, the windlock spell, which pulls the creature into a huge swirling vortex. Siluria shouts for Tilty to take advantage of the opening, and Tilty is more than ready to rush in and help. She pushes her hands forward and commands the darkness to crush their enemies, releasing huge dark claws that wrap around them. Around the wind trap, the magic of shadow and wind thickens and completely engulfs the monsters while the Night Watch keeps vigil. Hartman's knights simply lose their heads over how strong Tilty is, and Tilty just giggles. Meanwhile, Siluria is already analyzing the fight and thinks these demons are actually weaker than Dagger. The monsters are still growling and resisting, and Siluria throws out, "We need to finish off 2 more." Tilty is fired up. She shouts that she will give all her strength and rushes forward together with Siluria to put an end to the battle. But they are suddenly interrupted by a low voice asking what they think they are doing, and everyone freezes as a huge armored boot slams into the ground. It's Mobrib and the rest of the Debbie Hypnites. They came as a group and look like they're about to cause real trouble. Siluria immediately recognizes this guy. It's Mobrib, and Hartman's knights realize that he is the royal guard of the Divahip family, He tells them that he has finally appeared and that they all need to work together to save the city, but at the very moment he speaks, the group asks what he is doing because his face twisted and additional eyes began to grow all over his skin. Tilty and Siluria just stare in complete shock, firmly hoping that what they see is not real, while the knight begins to panic. One of Mobrib's huge eyes bulges out, and he loudly lets out the last rallying cry for Lord Walter. Suddenly, a huge flash of light explodes, and everyone in shock wonders, is it the power of the cursed item just before? The group is thrown back as a giant clawed hand slices through the air where people had just stood. The thing that was Mobrib starts growling about how Lord Walter will dominate everything, while the other knights call Hartman the enemy. In the next video, we'll be back with a new video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. 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 And the transformation is complete. Now they are just brainless beasts with too many mouths and eyes. Tilty and the others realize the worst has happened. Each of those guards has turned into a demon. Siluria can barely utter words, watching the horror unfold, and calls for her brother while Tilty's group is falling apart, but at the same time the story returns to what is happening with. Outside the Soul House, the estate still looks fairly calm. But in his room, he seemed to be sound asleep in bed, although it turned out that he had fallen into a very strange dream. His eyes suddenly opened wide, as if he saw something he could not believe. Which literally drags us into the very heart of the vision, where 2 colossal spirit beasts loomed over him. And then, creatures spoke, addressing him. The power they share is actually the power of a demon. They give him a stern warning: the more he uses that power, the more he gives his body to darkness. Sooner or later, he will simply turn into a monster who will have to forever abandon his humanity. The beasts loomed over him one last time and asked Soldal Ranger, what is his next move? The spirit beasts tirelessly press on his soul, insisting that it does not matter whether he becomes a demon or loses his humanity. But Soul is not at all upset. He simply replies that his fate was actually decided long ago. Standing tall between the 2 giant creatures, he shouts that his only goal is to protect his evil sister. He reaches out to the spirits and sternly tells them, just shut up and follow me. It seems the beasts accepted his determination, exclaiming that this is the true power of the god-demon style. And meanwhile, in the real world, Frey appears at the Ranger family's estate, carrying equipment. He just bursts through the front door, shouting for someone to tell her where Sold is hiding. Baba and the house guards are completely confused, desperately trying to stop her and asking what she needs. Frey calmly states that she is his friend and insists on being taken to his room, although Baba warns that he still needs to rest. She doesn't listen. She kicks the bedroom door wide open and shouts that he is still sleeping. Sold finally gets up and starts moving, stands by the window, stretches out his hand and checks his strength. Victory 4. Suddenly Frey appears with a wide smile, winks and says she sees he has finally woken up, while Baba just stands there looking completely stunned. Sold smiles warmly at her and says he literally just opened his eyes. She steps forward and hands over a long package wrapped in cloth, saying she has finally finished making the thing she promised him. Frey beams with pride as she tells him she made it just for him. Sold is thrilled, repeatedly saying that this sword is only for him. And before them stands an amazing weapon. Frey calls it the Sword of Sold. It is also called the Shining Blade or the Magic Sword of Light. Sold lifts him up, completely shocked, asks if she is serious about the name, and then notes how light and nice to the touch he is. Frey, confidently crossing her arms, says that the radiant blade will definitely respond to his magical sword style, but Sold understands that in the game. This is actually the very same legendary final weapon that is only obtained at the end, so it really is the most powerful sword that has ever existed. Frey warns Sold to be careful with the new weapon, and this momentarily catches him off guard. She admits, even being the one who created this sword, she honestly does not know the limit of its power. Frey looks anxious and says she is afraid that the blade might react too strongly to his magic and become a danger to him. Sold just stands with the sword in his hands and calmly tells her, "Don't worry, I can handle it." He begins to think about the future, painting images in his mind of huge monsters and dragons he will have to fight, knowing that with this new magical light sword, he will simply cut through anything that dares to stand in his way. Seeing his confidence, Frey cannot help but throw him a light proud glance, but then he tells him to move out, and at that very moment a scream is heard from outside. A monster has appeared in the city and everything begins to collapse. That thing disappeared in an instant, and smoke and flames were already bursting out from the surrounding buildings. While a bunch of monsters rushed through the streets, everyone panicked and ran to find shelter. Zweig shouts that they are really in trouble, the odds are completely against them, but the knight whispers to him, "Focus and hold the line." Siluria steps forward and shouts that everything will be fine, she will protect Tilty, and Tilty, no matter what happens, can only watch and call her name. One of the bandits in masks bursts inside, shouting, "Die for Lord Valg," and suddenly, from the sky suddenly fell a giant head made of energy. Everyone on the battlefield was shocked. Siluria raised her eyes wide open and, assessing the scale of the attack, suddenly realized she definitely knows what it is. Black dragon fire slash hits the ground with insane force, completely destroying everything around. The explosion tears out a huge smoking crater in the middle of the street and scatters the bandits in all directions. Siluria cannot hold back and exclaims excitedly when she sees who is standing there. Tilty calls Solda by name and Siluria loudly encourages her brother. Finally he appears, and it is clear he is ready for battle. That spirit just stands with those dark marks on his face and smirks boldly, as if he has already won. Bandits lose their temper and start shouting at the boy for interfering with their plans. But Saul didn't even flinch. He simply raises the blade high and commands the spirit in the sword to respond to him. And he releases a huge flash of an ice wolf, tearing the entire vicinity with icy energy. Sold rushes like a blurred shadow, cutting right through the center of the enemy group and scattering everyone in his path. Hartmann's knight screamed wildly with joy, and Siluria rushed forward with a huge smile on her face. When the ice crystals settled, she jumped straight into Sol's arms and hugged him tightly while he stood there with his sword. Siluria burst into tears of happiness. He was okay, and Sol only smiled gently and quietly said he was sorry for making everyone worry, especially Tilty. The rest of the group huddled around him, and Zweig and Ani loudly exclaimed how glad they were that he finally came to and was back in the fight. Sold looks at his friends and says he is simply relieved Siluria and the rest are safe. Zweig says those finishing moves were crazy, but Audra is even more shocked the sword didn't even break after such force. Ray looks at the aftermath with a quiet smile and says that finally everything is over. He nods and says he sees how everything happened, and Siluria looks at both of them with a huge smile. The sword itself is just incredible. It handles both the icy frost of the ice wolf and the flame of the black dragon without breaking, that's why. Sold raised the blade high so that everyone could see it, and explained that this weapon was made specifically for fighting in the Majin style. He stands proudly and tells the knights that this sword is the only one in the entire world. Siluria almost jumps for joy, telling Frey that she truly made the best sword just as she promised. Frey tells Sold that it's not just about the weapon, his own techniques have become much stronger, and Sold agrees that the sword is incredibly reliable. But everything changed when a worried expression appeared on Light's face. He doesn't understand why Imagine came here at all. Nearby, the city is falling apart, fires are breaking out, and the knights begin to run to tame this chaos. So, Heinz watches as smoke rises above the houses and decides that he must return to the young lord as soon as possible. Audrey notices that Valgar's soldiers are turning into Magians and wonders if their leader is behind that. This soldier realized that Debbie Hip's family is probably pulling the strings, but suddenly Saluria screamed she caught a glimpse of the future. Like calls her and she rushes in tears. Her clairvoyance shows something that clearly terrifies her. She says anxiously that the whole city is in trouble and there is serious danger here, and Soul can't withstand it. She asks what exactly she sees. In her vision, a giant shadow with glowing eyes appeared above the houses. It seemed as if it was about to engulf everything around. The soldier raises his sword with a determined look, ready to use his strength to cut through everything coming at them. Meanwhile, in the main noble estate in the city, clouds begin to hang over the rooftops. Someone rushes through the corridors with a sense of urgency, boots clacking on the floor, hastily heading to the office. Large double doors were kicked open with a loud bang. Someone bursts into the room like a storm, shouting the name Valgar, while the nobleman quietly sits at the table with a glass of wine. Valgar looks at him with disgust, calls him a brat, and yells at him for bursting into the office uninvited. He is clearly furious. Like he does not back down, shouting that he knows he is behaving rudely, but officially everyone is already tired of all Valgar's antics. He points directly at the nobleman and demands explanations. He has heard rumors that Valgar's own people are causing all the chaos in the city, and we will see each other next time. And Valgar just looks at him with an irritated expression, muttering about how annoying he has turned out to be. Then he asks why he still hasn't left the city, and this completely catches him off guard, making him ask what that was supposed to mean. Suddenly Valgar just loses control and shouts at the top of his lungs that the one trying to play the hero and act like some perfect ruler is to blame for everything. He shouts that Debbie Hip family, they are the ones really running this city, and Laken Ain's watch and expose him, calling him a complete scoundrel. He himself wonders why to confess right now at all, but tells Valgar that now, when he knows the truth, the time has come for the corrupt nobleman to end. The room fell silent for a moment, and Valgar let out a disgusting pig-like laugh, mocking those who believed that it was all over. He tells them that everything is just beginning, and looking at the sweat on the Einsteins' faces, they begin to understand something huge is about to happen. Valgar stands behind the table, completely panicked. He realizes he is losing control over the power he used. And then from his hand bursts out that disgusting fleshy mass with many eyes, and it grows much faster than he can handle. Like iron frozen from shock, they just stood and watched as the nobleman right before their eyes turned into a real monster. Meanwhile, Sold and the rest of the team drag him through the city streets, trying to reach the manor as quickly as possible, while Sold anxiously asks Saluria if she is 100% sure about the place from her vision. She says she is sure, so they continue. Tilty adds that in Valgar's house she feels a huge shadow, one that could level the entire town if they do not hurry. She insists that she will never forgive such a mess and adds to the guys, "You must stop this before it becomes too late." Suddenly he slammed on the brakes sharply, shouted for everyone to wait, and pointing at something ahead, felt a very bad premonition. Valgar's mansion begins to tremble. The whole house shakes as if the earthquake struck right here and only here. And then the roof simply explodes. Through the stone bursts a huge dark creature with glowing eyes, as if ready to tear everything around apart. The soldiers from the team were completely confused, staring at the mansion, and he screams from shock. And then someone rushes through the gates, shouting for everyone to retreat, and Sold realizes that both he and Inns barely escape. But he does not quiet down, shouting that the monster they are looking at is actually Valgar, and that the guy used some cursed tool to transform. Soul just froze in place, trying to understand how a person could so quickly turn into something like that. The whole group looks like tiny specks, standing before the record and fading completely. The huge creature growled, "This city is hers, and she will not give it to anyone." Now it is simply enormous, a true demon with a skull face and a giant eye right in the middle of its chest. Standing over the fragile ruins of the mansion, it lets out a deafening roar and loudly declares that Tilty belongs to him. Looking at this mess, Sold grimaced with disgust and called that thing a vile demon. And the monster does not care. It looks down on them as if at trash that it is about to sweep off the face of the earth. Sold instantly sprang into action, released a gust of wind, and shouted that he would not allow this, and then support him by shouting that the monster is a fool if it thinks it rules here, because their job is to protect the city. Sold calls out Leica's name, while Zweig and Saluria stand aside, frightened and shouting to their older brother, while Heinz growls orders for the knights to follow the young master, and they all shout back and prepare to launch an attack. The whole group looks like tiny ants next to the colossal demon looming over the ruins, forcing The monster looked even more terrifying, staring at them with its empty, dead eyes. Everyone gathers and launches a massive attack, throwing magic and steel at the beast, giving everything they have. And Valgar just stands and says they annoy him like a tiny thorn, and the team realizes their best shot didn't even leave a scratch. The monster only hissed at them to get away, and deep in its throat a strange light begins to gather. And suddenly it releases a colossal energy beam that mercilessly destroys everything in its path. The monster towers over the ruins and emits a disgusting, loud, and ridiculous laugh. At night, they hurriedly made their way through the dust, shouting whether the young master and princess escaped alive. Leica calms them, for now they are safe. Everyone combined magic into a shield, but Sold cannot believe the power they have to contend with. Sold sharply pulled Tilty closer, saying Walter that he is a monster because he threw away his humanity just to chase his distorted desires. Walter ignored everything and declared that he would wipe every speck of trash from the face of the city. He releases a huge explosion again, cutting the city like paper. Sold, the others just froze in complete shock, watching as the beam leveled everything to the ground. The entire neighborhood was illuminated by a giant explosion, and the monster stood there as a dark silhouette against the fire. Buildings begin to collapse and people scatter in all directions just to survive. Local families completely lose their minds, crying and screaming as their homes are destroyed. They stand nearby, looking at the ruined city, and the suffering people here is total chaos. And finally, he can't stand it and shouts the name Walgar at the top of his voice. The giant monster just stands and laughs while people flee everywhere, escaping and crying for help. But suddenly something huge caught him by surprise. A giant dragon of flame bites right into his neck. His soul bursts out of nowhere, tears through the air, and, shouting the name Walgar, puts everything he has into the strike. He strikes with his black dragon fiery slash. The flame completely engulfs the monster's head. Then the force of the blow is such that the monster's head sharply snaps back, and Sold lands perfectly on the neighboring roof. It calls Sold in shock, and Siluria shouts at her older brother while they all watch the battle unfold. Sold freezes in pose and throws out, "How do you like that?" but already looks back to see if he really did enough damage. It turns out the monster is not yet defeated. Thick black blood slowly flows from its neck, and it just stands there. The monster let out a giant, terrifying roar that shook the entire neighborhood. It completely lost control and from the roof was trading watches while the beast's neck healed right before his eyes. He says he finally sees what's going on and that he has figured out this monster that. So he finally realized this is a dark giant, a creature that regenerates no matter what is done to it. Sold's heart sank because he remembered that this thing is actually the final boss controlled by the villain at the very end of the game, but he can't believe it appeared right here of all places. He wonders if saving Tilty was what turned everything upside down, and suddenly realizes the fate of this world is changing much faster than he expected, leaving. This cornered him in the game. The hero won thanks to holy power, but Sold knows that now he has nothing like that. He thinks to use Tilty's dark power to destroy the monster just like he did when fighting Dogra. He immediately restrains himself. He feels this power is too dangerous to joke with because if that darkness intensifies even a little more, it could be her end. When Sold is terrified, fearing that this will only push Tilty faster toward her fate of becoming a villain, he tries to save her from it. Sold stands on the roof and gathers his willpower, telling himself that he must fight this fate no matter what happens, and begins to look around. His sword must be somewhere here. But from the cliff it is visible that the city is already completely in ruins. The dark giant simply walks through walls and smashes houses, and all this while the mysterious leader stands at the edge and watches it happen. The man in the mask looks at this chaos and, addressing Mr. Valgar, calls it beautiful, saying that Valgar's insane desire to rule everything has finally attracted a huge demonic power. With a grim look, he says that the real experiment is only beginning. He looks down at the people pressed together on the streets in fear and calls Tilty, naming her the Priestess of Darkness. Aloud he wonders how she will be able to resist this power. Tilty just stands amid the ruins, frightened and in tears, watching the world fall apart. Nearby, Siluria is also breaking down. She sobs, clinging to the one who seems about to snap because she sees his city being destroyed. Even the knights shout, desperately trying to fight back, but they clearly cannot withstand the pressure of this massive attack, which... It's even worse. The monster releases a powerful blast that levels the buildings around. Parents grab their children and run to save themselves, and people everywhere are knocked to the ground. Tilty begs for the nightmare to stop, her eyes wide open and full of tears, but only sinister laughter echoes back through the chaos. Tilty stands, trembling, and dark energy rises around her. She says she can't take it anymore and won't forgive them for what is happening. Tilty loses control and lets out a piercing scream, and a dark spot appears right on her forehead. From the ground grows a giant monster made of wood and shadows. Tilty stands right on its head and screams again that she won't forgive them. He fell to the ground completely numb. Siluria, nearby, frightened, asks what this giant thing even is. The giant, only the upper half of the body visible, looms over the ruins of the city, as if it came straight out of a nightmare. He was selling watches on the roof while the wooden giant was fighting the bone monster. He suddenly realizes what he is seeing, and he can. I can't believe how much dark power is coming from Tilty. Now she is much more powerful than he expected. The bone giant does not retreat. It stubbornly stands in the middle of the whole scene. Tilty, from her place on the giant's head, points forward and calls the darkness, and then, tears were still running down her face, she shouted at the monster, "Come on, attack." The dark giant delivers a huge punch that hits the bone giant right in the face, and the bony giant let out a loud, painful scream, and the force of the blow began to tear him apart. Tilty stands on the head of her summoned one and looks down at the rubble, while the giant looms over everything. She sobs and loses her head, shouting at the top of her lungs for the enemies to simply disappear. Lying on the ground, Lake is completely stunned by this spectacle, calls him a dark giant, and says that his power is a completely different level. He notices that every time the dark giant even touches the enemy, the Valgar monster slowly crumbles. As if a miraculous power of darkness that erases everything has become even stronger, and the bony giant does not stop screaming in pain. Siluria looks up and says that Tilty is truly incredible for having done this, but she looks quite worried about something. She recalls how before she could only move the hands of darkness, and now she suddenly realizes everything is completely different. The giant finally materializes with a whole body right in the middle of the city. Tilty stands on the giant's head with arms outstretched and exclaims, "This is exactly what I wanted." She seems completely out of her mind, enthusiastically saying how wonderful this dark power is that is finally descending. She encourages the giant, urging him on, "Go further, make all that despair even louder." Meanwhile, she commands, "Just let the darkness swallow everything that is visible." Tears flood her face. She screams that the enemy tramples human lives and shouts that she will never forgive them. The dark giant raises his massive, twisted arm high into the air at an angle. The one standing on his shoulder looks tiny when the bone monster let out a pitiful scream, completely unable to stop what is approaching. The dark giant delivers a devastating blow. His fist hits the bone monster's head directly, breaking it, and from the force of the blow alone, the creature's jaw shattered into pieces. Like and Siluria froze on the ground, completely shocked by the insane power that Tilty shows. Like watches the chaos and asks why all this is happening, while Sold stands unwavering in the smoke. Tilty can't hold back. She cries, asks why he is standing in her way, and screams for her brother. Sold simply utters the name Tilty, standing in the middle of the crater with his sword drawn, and he tells her that she needs strength to never lose the reason to live, and promises that he will not let her fall into darkness.